Let's get started. Virtual KEDA Legislative Day. I'm Steve Jack. I think we have over 130 registered for our Zoom conference, and we're up to about 90 right now. So most of the people that signed up, at least over 50%, are here at the beginning. Thanks to everyone who signed up today. I want to welcome a few new folks who signed up who have expressed to Mary Perez that they will be joining KEDA this year. So welcome to those folks. We will be sending out 2021 membership forms soon to those new members and renewals to our existing members. Thanks to today's sponsors, Black Hills Energy and Kansas Manufacturing Solutions. We appreciate your support. Last year, we were able to hold this event in person in Topeka, but we had to pivot to a new technology these past 12 months. And we are hopeful to begin getting together in person for events like this sometime later this year. Our fall conference is scheduled to be in person in September. I think the third week of September in Salina, but we're going to take it month by month and see where we are in the summer with vaccinations and infection rates and make a decision mid-year. That being said, we're trying to give you value for your membership, and so we have a couple of free to members webinars coming up in the next couple of months. The first this year will take place on February 24th, where we will get an update on the National Bioagro Defense Facility, NBAF, in Manhattan, which is scheduled to go online, I believe, this year. That's something that should have an impact on all our communities. You can sign up on our KEDA website for that. Mary Perez has sent out emails with a link as well. On March 24th, we will hear from the Midwest Dairy Association, so we're very excited about that. I want to recognize right off the bat Mitch Robinson from the Salina Community EDO, who did a lot of the work getting today's speakers and putting the agenda together. Big thanks to Mitch, who will be sharing introduction responsibilities with me today. Mitch is our second vice president of the organization and our legislative contact. He works with Sandy Braden, our contracted legislative liaison, and he provides testimony when needed during the session. You'll be hearing from both of them later about legislation important to the economic development community here in Kansas. And you know, none of this could have happened without the work of Mary Perez behind the scenes, as well as Heather Pearson. Thanks to each of them. We are recording today's conference, which will be uploaded within a day or so and available to you on the KEDA website. We will also be sending out a survey to everyone after today's event, so look for that. And please send in your thoughts on today and how we may better serve you. I want to remind you to stay on mute throughout the presentations. Janet McCrae has reminded me that she has the mute capabilities to mute your speaker, and so I'm watching my step. Let's see. Zoom has two views. I'm sure everyone is pretty sophisticated on Zoom, but just want to remind you that you can choose gallery or speaker. If you want to use speaker view, your view will focus primarily on the speaker rather than on 25 of your colleagues. So your choice. Finally, if you have any questions during any of the presentations, I think each of our speakers will have a few minutes after their presentations to respond. Please use the chat function at the bottom of your screen, and we'll have Carrie Folletti and Janet McCrae ready to read your question. Now let me introduce our first speaker. 2 years ago, Laura Kelly became the 48th governor of the state of Kansas. As a state senator for 14 years, Kelly was a leading voice in promoting healthy families in Kansas and in the importance of quality public schools in communities of all sizes. She built a reputation as someone who worked on both sides of the aisle to get things done. One of the things our organization depends on is a strong Kansas Department of Commerce. We have appreciated her support for the department and appointment of Secretary David Toland and now Lieutenant Governor Toland to rebuild and energize the agency. I know both the governor and David are proud of the actual quantifiable results of the past challenging year. We are honored to have the governor kick off our 2021 KEDA Legislative Day, and I'll turn it over now to Governor Laura Kelly.
Well, thanks, Steve. I do appreciate the introduction and the invitation to kick off your annual Legislative Day event. I do wish you could be here in the Capitol, but we'll deal with that next year. I want to start by thanking all of you for your work on behalf of our Kansas communities, particularly over the past year. The landscape for economic development has changed drastically since last March. The pandemic actually created new challenges for all of us, but our state's small businesses were among the hardest hit by the virus's economic implications. Your advocacy on behalf of Kansas businesses will continue to be incredibly valuable as we move forward in our economic recovery efforts. As you all know, economic development has been a priority of mine long before COVID-19. When I took office, we hit the ground running right away to rebuild our state's economic foundation and stimulate development opportunities. Commerce Secretary David Tolan led the agency in restoring essential business recruitment tools that had been decimated by previous administrations, including the agency's international division. By growing and supporting Commerce's economic development tools, Kansas has created an aggressive team across the nation that's working to make our state competitive on a global scale when it comes to business recruitment. This effort is paying off. Despite the economic challenges of 2020, we broke the record for new capital investment last year, exceeding $2.5 billion and creating more than 13,000 new and retained jobs. And we're not slowing down. My administration recognizes that creating a strong economy requires more than tools in a toolbox. One of the first things companies look at when they decide where to locate is whether a community has the workforce to support their operations. To recruit and retain more workers in Kansas, we must build on the fundamental ideas that make our state the best place in the nation to work, to live, and to raise a family. This is particularly difficult for some of our rural communities, which encounter unique barriers to accessing affordable housing, childcare, healthcare, and broadband. Among our efforts to bridge this urban-rural divide, I established the Office of Broadband Development, which works across state government with local units of government and with the private sector to support broadband development. High-speed internet is essential not only for business operations, but also for virtual school and telemedicine, much underscored by the pandemic. That's why we've taken an all-hands-on-deck approach to broadband expansion. With resources from the Federal CARES Act, my Strengthening People and Revitalizing Kansas, or SPARK task force, created 2 grant programs specifically for broadband development. Thanks to their efforts, nearly $50 million in connectivity emergency response grants were awarded to communities across the state, along with 25 broadband partnership adoptions grants, totaling more than $8 million. The 10-year Eisenhower Legacy Transportation Plan, or IKE, also included funding for broadband acceleration grants. Through IKE, we've allocated $85 million over the next 10 years to help bridge the digital divide. The first time in Kansas history that state general funds have been put toward broadband development. Commerce's reestablished Community Development Division and the new Office of Rural Prosperity are partnering with our cities and counties to generate creative solutions to rural growth. Commerce is pursuing legislation this year that will alter the Rural Housing Incentive District program. The program's proposed changes would allow for upper story housing units in central business districts to be developed. We're also continuing to work with the legislature to implement improvements that will make our Rural Opportunity Zones program more effective. This past summer and fall, Commerce convened a working group to tackle why the ROZ program is popular for some and a challenge for others. Using this input, they built on core tenets our counties believe will assist in encouraging people to establish long-term residence in rural Kansas. Commerce is working actively to get that proposal into a bill and hopes to introduce it within the next couple of weeks. Our focus on growth for the last 2 years, 2020 in particular, has been attracting new businesses and people to settle in Kansas. We'll continue those efforts going forward. But as we emerge from the pandemic, we emphasize attracting visitors from out of state to spend time in Kansas, enjoying our unique natural resources, vistas, and communities, and contributing to our economic growth. To that end, I announced my intent to relocate the state's tourism division to the Department of Commerce. This merger will streamline collaboration among convention and visitors bureaus, local economic development organizations, and other partners across the state. It'll allow us to capitalize on our efforts to attract more revenue, businesses, and residents to Kansas. And it sends a clear message to our industry partners and prospective companies that this administration will use every tool at its disposal to spur new economic development. I appreciate your organization's advocacy for this move. Going forward, your continued engagement with elected officials will be critical in ensuring we can get this finalized. But that's not all we need your help with this year. I'm sure you're all aware that on Monday, I announced a plan for Medicaid expansion that is similar to the proposal I introduced last year, but with one key difference. This bill funds expansion in full using revenue generated from legalizing the production and sale of medical marijuana. Medicaid expansion is critical to Kansas's COVID-19 recovery, both as it relates to increased access to healthcare and to economic development. If we were to expand Medicaid, it would create more than 13,000 new jobs in our state. It would inject millions of dollars into our rural communities. Additionally, a healthy workforce keeps our economy humming, and healthcare access is high on the list of must-haves to businesses and families considering relocating. I ask you to stay engaged with lawmakers on this issue as well. Ramp up your efforts to help us bring expansion home this year. Before I go, I want to leave you with an update on an announcement of a new strategy that resets our state's compass in the direction of long-term sustainable growth. As you know, the Commerce Department has been developing the Kansas Framework for Growth, the state's first comprehensive economic development plan in more than 30 years. The Framework for Growth will serve as a resource for local economic developers and help Kansas better leverage community assets and investments to support long-term growth. Commerce Secretary and Lieutenant Governor David Tolan will outline the framework in more detail here in a moment. We'll be presenting the plan to the legislature and to the public tomorrow morning. But we thought it important for us to engage with this group first because the critical leadership needed to move our communities forward is on this Zoom. Thanks again for your work on behalf of Kansans. I look forward to partnering with all of you to keep our state on the road to growth and recovery. With that, I'll hand it back over to you, Steve. Everybody take care, stay healthy.
Thank you, Governor. We appreciate your words and comments about the framework for growth and the ERO for tourism division to move back to commerce, as well as the announcement this week on Medicaid expansion and medical marijuana. There are a lot of things that are happening, and in these contentious times, we wish you and the Kansas legislature a lot of patience and goodwill as we try to move the state forward. Are there any, I don't see any questions. I actually didn't ask if you would take any, Governor, but it doesn't appear that we have any at this time.
Okay.
So appreciate it.
I'll go ahead and sign off. Thank you all. Take care. Have a good day.
Thank you. So now let's see, do we have the Lieutenant Governor?
He's not on yet.
He's not on yet. Well, then I think it's the Deputy Secretary has to do a little tap dancing, don't you think? Isn't that the way it works, Bill?
That is exactly the way it works, Steve. Can I, I'm going to take back the cheesecake for making me dance.
Yes.
I
Yes.
can hear David next door. So, and I apologize. We had another call that preempted this. So the governor has not yet made it on?
No, the governor has. You just missed the governor.
Okay.
You are in between the governor and lieutenant governor.
All right. Well, I'm going to pop my head over next door and see if I can see if he might be available early.
Okay. And while you do that, I can introduce you to those in the audience who may not know you. Well, go ahead and get him while I do that. Yes. Okay. That was Bill Murphy. He's the Deputy Secretary of the Kansas Department of Commerce. Bill has a long track record of local economic development in some pretty good-sized organizations. The most recent one is Tulsa's Chamber of Commerce as the Director of Economic Development. And so I think we're real excited to have him on the Kansas Commerce team. And the KEDA Executive Committee had some issues that we wanted to run by the agency, and he kind of smoothed some stuff over. And so we really appreciate his listening ear and how quickly he has responded to our concerns. So any news, Bill?
I was told he is on, but clearly I was misinformed. So
well, I would just say this, Janet, let me know that Julie Lorenz is on. Oh, and then so is Lieutenant Governor. There you go.
there he is.
Okay, good. Well, we were doing a little tap dancing, David, and that is my cue to introduce you now that I see your face, if you are ready to go.
I'm ready to go. They had it down for 1:30 for me to speak, so I apologize if I'm late.
No, you're not late. Your boss was succinct. So
Okay.
trying to put a positive spin on all of this. Let me introduce you. David Tolan has been serving as the Kansas Secretary of Commerce, as you all know, for the past 2 years, but was appointed last month by Governor Kelly as the 52nd Kansas Lieutenant Governor. And David is a 7th generation Kansan who served for 12 years on the front lines of economic development, as most of us on today's call do, at the local level as president of Thrive Allen County. He previously worked for the mayor of Washington, D.C., and prior to that, he worked for the city managers of Reno, Nevada, and Bonner Springs, Kansas. He spent much of his first year as the Secretary of Commerce on the road, meeting with communities, chambers, and EDCs, and listening to their needs, your needs, and concerns. And much of his second year, completing the rebuild of our state's economic development agency. We appreciate what you have done to date and are excited to hear from you today, this time in your dual role of Secretary of Commerce and now Lieutenant Governor. So without further ado, David Tolan.
Mr. President, thank you very much. And let me start by saying that I got the best team in the business at the Department of Commerce. We really have just amazing professionals, folks that were here before and folks that we've brought in combined have been doing incredible things in partnership with the folks that are on this call today. And so shout out to my team, but shout out more generally to economic development professionals. So with this new gig, or additional gig, I guess I should say, I'm meeting a lot of new folks. So we're talking to foster care advocates, we're talking, vaccine, and all that's very interesting, and I'm enjoying it. But it's good to be back with my people. So thanks for having me on. Why don't we go ahead and start the slideshow, if we could, please. Thanks, Mary. So some of you have seen this before. for others, this may be some new news. So let's go to the next slide. I'm going to walk you through just kind of some quick highlights, much of which you'll already know about what we've been doing at Commerce. And then we'll talk framework, which is being released by the governor at 10 a.m. tomorrow in a virtual press event, which I want to encourage everybody to log in for if you've got time and can join us. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the Office of Rural Prosperity, which I'm now the head of with Lieutenant Governor Rogers' departure. And then I want to focus really on legislative priorities. So I'm going to go fairly quickly on the first part so that we can spend enough time on legislative priorities and have Q&A. Next slide. So I think all of you know this. We have been working not just to rebuild the Department of Commerce, but to rethink how we do economic development. There's three legs to our stool: workforce development, community development, business development. You've heard me say that before. What I'm most proud of, actually, I'm not sure what I'm most proud of because we've got such a long list of good things that have happened in these three areas. It's incredible. Whether we're talking about the fact that we have a fully stocked domestic recruitment team with top-notch professionals on the East Coast, on the West Coast, in Dallas, in Chicago, in Springfield, Missouri, in Kansas City, or whether we're talking about how we've got our international division back and we've got terrific talent there as well, a mix of new and old talent. Community development, we've set up that division as its own thing again. So we separated it out from business development. Some of you may recall from a couple of years ago. And that's allowed us to really give that focus around quality of life, which is something I believe in very strongly, and the governor believes in very strongly as a driver of business decisions. And so there we've gotten the Kansas Main Street program back on its feet, resurrected from the ashes. We've got the Community Service Tax Credit program. We've got CDBG, where I think we're going to have some pretty significant changes that I hope will be well received by everybody on this call coming later this year, and so much more. And then our Workforce Development Division, my gosh, they have just been incredible in pivoting in response to the pandemic. We were one of the first 4 states to start doing virtual job fairs. In March, we jumped in and said, you know, I bet we're not getting back into the gymnasiums anytime soon with the traditional job fairs. We got to do something different. And we acted quickly. And frankly, we acted before the prices went up on all that, on those programs. And so it's, I'm proud of what we've done and how we're getting people back to work in response to really what's been the greatest economic calamity that we've had in our country in 90 years. Next slide. So framework released tomorrow, 10 a.m. Be there or be square. It's going to be, you know, it's been a long time coming. Many of you on this call have been part of developing this plan. We had over 2,000 different individuals that we engaged in the process. So let's talk a little bit about what's in it. Next slide. So I think we all know that in terms of headwinds, our state's growth rate has lagged that of the nation, and particularly that of our peer states. We have a huge problem with losing young people who we educate and nurture in this state, and who after graduation, whether we're talking high school or community college or technical college or university, choose to go to other states. And we have a significant decline that is starting and is going to accelerate in our working age population in Kansas, and a large percentage of the jobs in this state are at high risk of being lost due to automation. So it's a serious time. We have to act with a sense of urgency here. Now, what's fortunate is that we've got strong fundamentals in Kansas. So we have a fairly diversified economy. We have anchor sectors like aviation, advanced manufacturing, that are stabilizers for us in sometimes and others, maybe a different situation, but we have strong anchors. And then if you look at our educational system in this state, it is one of our top assets that we can use to market, but we've got to harness it in ways that support job growth, that support economic growth in Kansas. Next slide. So the framework for growth is really built around the 4 strategic pillars that are in the center: talent, innovation, community assets, and good, sound public growth policy. And these pillars are intertwined in all of the target sectors. So talent is key to food and agriculture, but innovation is also essential to food and ag. You know, we do things differently today than we did 10 years ago, and 10 years from now, the world will continue to be different. So it's essential that we innovate. It's essential that, you know, if we're talking food and ag, that we're thinking about UAS, that we're thinking about, you know, we're doing precision ag, that when it comes to food processing, that we've got a strong emphasis on innovation. And so these are all intertwined together. And we know that Kansas is a place of places. Our geography really matters here. And so community assets are very important. What Southwest Kansas has strategic advantages in is not what Northeast Kansas has, and vice versa. And so we want to make sure that we're leveraging the assets in each of our regions. And then as it relates to policy, this is about having the right tools in the toolkit. This is about economic development incentives. It's about all the factors from a public policy perspective that create a climate that is conducive to growth, and not just the kind of tepid growth that we've seen over the last decade, but aggressive, breakneck, hold on by the seat of your pants kind of growth. That's what we want to see in this state. And we don't want to just see it in the places that have historically been our growth drivers, you know, just in our metros. We want to see this growth happening across the state in all regions of Kansas, but using and leveraging the assets that are there as the key to that growth. Next slide. So you all can read, I'm not going to read these to you, but we felt it was really important with this plan, both to be broad about how we were going to approach accelerating the rate of growth in our economy, but also we have to help people understand to some extent what we're talking about. And so the target sectors that you see here should not be a surprise to anyone who's working in economic development in Kansas. This is where we're naturally strong, where we historically have done well, but what we're talking about is doing them differently. And again, with this focus on innovation. So, the world is constantly changing. And one of the things I love about Kansas in some ways is that we don't shift with every single wind. And that's nice. But the fact of the matter is, if we don't have this focus on innovation, we're going to be left behind. And so we have to have an ecosystem in this state that supports innovation, that encourages innovation, and that supports the innovators, the entrepreneurs, the folks who are tinkering right now, the folks who have a dream and they want to figure out, okay, how do I take this idea in my head and turn it into a prototype? How do I commercialize this concept, turn it into jobs? And we've got the right assets here in the state to be able to do that, but we haven't pulled them together in a way that is as focused and targeted as we need. And so these are the target sectors that will come out in the plan. That doesn't mean that there isn't a lot more that we're going to be doing. So for example, when I talk about innovation, an opportunity for our state is cybersecurity. I got an iced tea at Sonic this morning. I put my Visa card in the credit card machine. There are people who figured out how to make sure that my credit card number doesn't get skimmed when I insert it into the machine. That's cybersecurity. You've been hearing about the Department of Labor and the incredible number of fraud cases that we've had, and not just at the Kansas Department of Labor, but across the country. That's cybersecurity. Cybersecurity really impacts every part of our lives in ways that are seen and unseen. Where I think we got an opportunity as a state is to go deep on cybersecurity, establish ourselves as a center of excellence, use our community college and university system to help train the talent that we need in cybersecurity. And in the process, we're going to create a lot of new high-paying jobs in the state, the kind of jobs that can keep our kids here after they graduate from college. And so, or technical school or whatever they want to do. But we got to make sure that they're trained up. Right now, there are 2,500 unfilled cybersecurity jobs in Kansas. That is a huge need, and it is also a huge opportunity. And so I bring this up just to say that if you don't see a target sector on this list that you want, it doesn't mean it isn't going to be addressed through the framework. But we had to give you some parameters of what we're talking about so that the public understands that we're not moving away from where we've historically been strong and where we have natural assets. This isn't a radical plan. This is about taking what Kansas is good at and doing it better and doing it with a culture of innovation. Next slide. So, Office of Rural Prosperity. Lieutenant Governor Lynn Rogers launched the Office of Rural Prosperity for Governor Kelly. Governor from well before she was governor has been an advocate for rural communities in our state and making sure that there's a high quality of life in these communities and that these communities are positioned to be able to achieve whatever their local vision is for themselves. So they want to grow because of a manufacturing operation. Great, we want to make sure that they've got the tools, they've got the infrastructure, that we've got the broadband, every piece that goes into supporting that. And so Office of Rural Prosperity has really focused on first taking in data, doing good listening, hearing what it is that folks want in their communities. And what we've heard consistently is that housing is it's the base of the pyramid. When you think about what it's going to take to support rural Kansas communities, we've got to get more rooftops. We've got to have more dollars to renovate the units that are there. And so housing is key. And we've got the first statewide housing study that's been done, I think, in 27 years is underway now with KHRC, with funding provided by the Office of Rural Prosperity and ongoing engagement by ORP. And so that's progress. I would add that we're also starting a new process where Commerce, using KHRC as a convener, is going to be engaging directly with housing developers so that they've got some sense of the economic development project successes that we have going around the state. And we hope that that can spur a level of interest by housing developers in some of these communities around the state, because they'll have more just direct knowledge, getting it straight from Commerce that, hey, we just closed project Green Paint, and Project Green Paint is 150 new manufacturing jobs going into Community X. If I'm a housing developer and I have that information, that may get Community X on my radar screen in a way that it hadn't been in the past. So we're going to be a lot more transparent about the things we can be transparent about when we're talking about economic development successes, and we think that'll help on the housing front. So childcare, Governor Kelly, as the education and economic development governor, has been really focused on childcare from day one, and we've done some creative things around childcare, including with the community service tax credits. Last year with that program, we set aside $1 million specifically for childcare facilities. We have done a large economic development project in Wyandotte County we did that included incentives to support establishment of a childcare facility, and you can expect to see more of that. And so that's a result of the kind of engagement that we've done through RRP. Healthcare. So we must expand Medicaid in this state. We have too many rural hospitals that are at risk of closure, and we have too many people that are reliant on having healthcare close to home. So it's essential in rural places that, where you can't necessarily easily get to the metros, that you've got good healthcare at home. Infrastructure, so the Ike Transportation Plan is such a huge step forward, and I know you'll be hearing from Secretary Lorenz shortly. Be sure and thank her for her leadership on getting that transportation bill passed. What's exciting to me is that it includes $5 million for the next 3 years, and then $10 million a year after that, up till year 10, for broadband infrastructure. And so we opened that funding round in December, closed it last month. We've got a public comment period that I think may have just closed. And is that right, Bill? Yeah, okay, just closed. And we're in the process of publishing those public comments, but we're gonna get this money out on the street into communities quickly so that we can get more fiber in the ground, so that we can get more hotspots, and we can address the parts of our state that are first unserved. And then we're going to work on getting speeds up in places that are underserved. So infrastructure isn't just about roads and pipes. We really see it as being about broadband as well. And then workforce recruitment, retention, and so forth. Key to everything that we do. We all know as economic development professionals, it's about talent, talent, talent. So ORP will continue to work in those areas. There may be some stylistic changes that we make with kind of how I want to do ORP. So we'll have more details to come. Next slide. So we've got 3 bill reintroductions from last year, and we got 7 new. Go to the next slide. The reintroductions are, first, we've got Star Bonds. And let's go ahead to the next slide, Mary. So Star Bonds have been an extraordinarily helpful tool in terms of developing new tourism destinations in the state. We're making some significant modifications to it, though, one of which is we want Star Bonds to be more usable in smaller communities, non-metropolitan communities. And we also want to make sure that we're broadening Star Bonds so that it's not just for the traditional tourist destinations where mom and dad and the kids pile in the minivan and go to a water park or museum or whatever, but that we also include the attraction of headquarters of companies as an eligible use of Star Bonds. When you've got a company headquarters, you are bringing in vendors, suppliers, folks that are, that want to be vendors or suppliers. You've got folks coming from satellite offices into the headquarters, and ultimately those are new heads in beds and people that are spending money in restaurants, just like mom and dad and the kids who are coming for other types of attractions in the state. So we want to use Star Bonds to do that. We think these are smart modifications, and we need your support as KDA members as we go through the legislative process here. Next, Angel Investor Tax Credit Program. Sorry, go back. Angel Investor Tax Credit Program. So going for a 5-year extension. The Angels program has been an extraordinarily powerful tool and one that aligns so well with the framework for growth and our focus on innovation. So we want to make sure that folks that are developing cancer drugs, that have new bioscience products and the like, whatever it might be, these innovations, that we can get them the capital they need to be able to grow. And so this has been a tremendously popular program, and we expect that with any luck, it'll get through the legislature this month, and Governor Kelly can sign it into law in March. But stay tuned on that. 2 pieces related to HPIP. So first, we are going to remove the training requirement from HPIP. This is in response to what we've heard from all of you as economic development professionals, and it's in response to what we've heard and what Governor Kelly has heard directly from companies when we've been working particularly on large CapEx projects. So what has happened with this training requirement, there's 2 ways you can qualify. You can designate 2% of your payroll for training, or you can use Kit and Kerr. And so what's happened is that the 2% doesn't make any sense for larger companies. And so what they wind up doing is they apply for Kit and Kerr. They don't really want Kit or Kerr, but they're using it so they can get HPIP, which is perfectly legal, and that's how the system is set up. But the result of that has been when we are requiring companies to apply for incentives to get incentives, it's wasteful. We have not been able to maintain the levels of Kit and Kerr grants that we want to. 10 years ago, the average Kit grant was like 2,000, somewhere around 600. So that's a direct result of how we've drained these accounts. So we want to remove that linkage between HPIP and Kit and Kerr. Next slide. The other HPIP piece that is a significant change, this is probably the biggest thing that we're doing this year, is permitting the sale, the transfer of up to 50% of unused HPIP credits. It's a one-time deal. You can sell up to half, and this will only be for projects that are from this year going forward. So we're not doing a retro here, and I know a lot of people are disappointed on that, but we can't afford it. Fiscal note would break the bank. But we think this is a modification to HPIP that will make us a lot more competitive with other states. Companies appreciate the large HPIP offers that we make. You know, on paper, they're very competitive, but at the end of the day, if they don't have sufficient Kansas tax liability to redeem the credits, those big offers are of no value. I'm going to go a little quicker here now. So minority women and service disabled veterans, I want to make sure that we are growing more small businesses in the state. And so what the governor and I have discussed is that with this bill, require agents to do an annual plan or goals around purchasing from these types of companies. And, you know, so you think about, for me as at the Department of Commerce, we buy a lot of stuff every year. And I don't know exactly how that all happens within my department, but it occurred to me at one point, we have the small minority and women-owned business enterprise division of the state government in our office, but I don't know what I'm doing as a purchaser, as the cabinet member, around actually buying from businesses that we're here to serve. And so I want the secretaries of all the agencies to be thinking about this and to set annual goals. So that's what this bill would require. Our HID program, the way our HID works, for those who aren't familiar, it's essentially a TIF for housing. And so if you want to go build a cul-de-sac on the edge of town in a cornfield and put up 5 houses, our HID is perfect. What it does not allow currently is to do vertical construction. And so if you look in rural communities, some of the best assets they have are the buildings that are downtown on Main Street that may or may not have something on the first floor, but in most cases have nothing but pigeons on the second floor. We'd like to be able to use our HID so that developers can turn those second floor open spaces into apartment units or into living units of some kind. And so that's what this modification to our HID would do. Next slide. So R&D tax credits, again, with this focus on innovation, we are going to be working to get more tools to help high growth companies that maybe they're in tech, bioscience, whatever it might be, have more tools. And so that's what we're talking about with R&D tax credits. It's also what we're talking about on the SBIR matching grant program. So Kansas is among the worst states in the country for utilization of the SBIR program. And so what we're trying to do here is provide matching grants as a way to prime the pump, get more federal dollars to these startup innovative companies, and let's try and supercharge the growth of these companies and more broadly, the growth of the whole innovation ecosystem in Kansas. Rural Remote Worker Initiative. So this is a So is that we had a company, large company in Johnson County, express they wish there were some way kids that are coming out of K-State but who don't want to leave Manhattan. That they're very happy where they are. They don't want to move at this point, but they'd love to have the job, and the company would love to have them. And so what we're trying to do with this Rural Remote Worker Initiative is provide an incentive. We think this is good for our metros, it's good for business, it's good for our rural areas as well. Extension of RAWS. So we're waiting on this bill to come out, but let me give you the highlights here. So first, the governor has said from day one that if you want to use RAWS as it is, we're not taking RAWS away. What we do want to make, though, are some significant improvements to the program that will make it more useful for the large number, the level of success with RAWS that we would hope for. There are some counties that have done a tremendous job, Greeley County, Phillips County. Other counties haven't, though. And so the changes we're going to be making include permitting to cover not just associates and bachelor's degrees and up, but also to cover technical college tuition and cosmetic and forth. That will be covered under the program going forward. We also want, for those people who are coming to RAWS counties that don't have any student debt, but they'd like to buy a home. If you don't have student debt, you can't use that part of it. We want you to be able to use that toward a down payment to buy a house. And so we think that's a good common sense change. Also, we are going to give communities two options in this bill on how they want to engage with RAWS. So you can have the regular plan, which is RAWS as it stands now with those modifications I just described. So it's about the income tax portion and the student, or in this case, down payment assistance program. Or you can have that, but also commit to a 5-year community capacity building program. So year one is going to be about community image. We have a lot of communities that don't have an up-to-date website. If they do have a website, maybe the main site is of the town water tower. And I think all of us know in this business that how you present yourself is incredibly important. So year one for communities that want to commit to this would be where we provide technical assistance to get your website in order, get your social media in order, and do essentially the work on the image side so that you can be competitive when a potential resident or a potential business Googles your town and pulls up the website. So second is we're going to have in year two a small projects program. Having come out of Allen County and the work that we did there, I believe, because I've seen it, that you got to get wins. You got to get the benches on Main Street. You got to get the flower boxes. You got to get some small projects done so people can see tangible things and they can believe things will get better. And so what we're doing here is providing some small matching grants to communities so that they can get these wins. And then years 3 through 5 are about housing. And that's going to be key. So year 3 is assessment. Year 4 is mobilization. Year 5 is they're going to build rooftops. And so, and we will be engaged at every step with these communities in that work. It's a lot harder. Not every county is going to want to do this 5-year program, but we think the potential results could be significant. Last but not least, the tourism ERO. Thank you very much to KDA for its support of this. We've had a very positive response from the legislature so far. We're hopeful that that will continue. For those who aren't familiar, the tourism division will move from the Department of Wildlife, Parks and Tourism back to the Department of Commerce. And we think that makes sense because tourism at the end of the day is an economic development activity, and we are the state's lead economic development agency. So I think that's it for my slides, and I'm sorry I've gone so long, but I hope there's time for some questions.
And let me unmute myself. Yes, and we have some waiting for you. Appreciate it, David. And I'm going to turn it over to Janet McCray and Carrie Folletti. Janet, do you have some questions you'd like to ask the Lieutenant Governor?
Hello, sir. Did have a couple of questions for you. A couple of people wanted to be sure to express their appreciation for the connection to housing and doing work with the Housing Resources Commission. So thank you for that. Had a question in addition. This past year has been involved with a lot of Spark funding and the CARES funding. And I think we've probably all heard the word pivot as many times as we would like to. But certainly your staff has been very involved in the work in that area. With the new federal dollars coming that way, anything on the horizon for dollars that may pass through there that we may want to be watching for? And David may be frozen.
I think he's frozen.
I think I got most of that question.
Okay.
The connection wasn't great, but let me see if I can take a stab at it. So as it relates to additional federal stimulus dollars, short answer is we don't know yet how this is going to go. Whether, like with the the CARES Act 2 that was passed at the end of December, there's $300 million, for example, there, which is competitive grants for broadband. And so right now, Commerce is in the process of mobilizing to make sure that we are competitive for those dollars and that we can bring a chunk of that back to the state. We don't know in whatever the stimulus bill that will get passed next, we don't know yet what it will include in terms of dollars to support small businesses. If there are dollars for that purpose, we don't know what will be run through the Department of Commerce or if it will be done differently. I'll tell you, it was the heck of a team normally to do retail grant making, essentially. But we've learned so much, and I'm really proud of our team. I think we did 57 $18,000. And so nearly 3,000 individual grants that we did through the Department of Commerce just to small businesses. That doesn't include all the broadband work, that doesn't include grants to manufacturers and so forth. So short answer, we don't know, but I bet we'll do it better than we did the first time. And I think we did darn well under the circumstances with these grants in round one.
Thank you for your leadership on that. Did have a question from Jack in regard to the women-owned certification, and I think Rhonda answered that in the chat for him, but had a couple of other quick legislative questions. Does the remote worker program have a bill number yet? Are you aware of one?
We're waiting on the revisor still at this point. They're backed up. We have 4 bills that haven't come out yet, and that's one of them. And so I don't think we have an RS number yet.
And then a question on the ROS. Does that include expanding any counties or simply tweaking the program as it exists?
Well, that's always the question. And I had to smile when I heard when Steve said it was going to be Janet and Carrie. I'm like, I know what the question's going to be here from both Miami and Cali counties. So here's how we chose to define rural in the bill as far as 5,000 or less. And so we had to draw a line somewhere, and there were some folks that wanted it to be 5,000, and it's been all over the place, or have it be related to proximity to a metro. We settled on a population of 35,000. This has to go through the legislative process. We'll see what happens, but that's how we did it.
That's great. Thank you, sir. And we appreciate your efforts. We know that there has to be a line and a balance, and we appreciate your efforts to do that. I think that pretty much clears up the questions that we had in the chat. Oh, Jack Elliston had a question about Kit and Kerr. Is there a target number that's being looked at for the difference on that?
In terms of where we're trying to get on average award on Kit and Kerr?
His question just is there a number that we're shooting at for on Kit and Kerr? So
a dollar number, and I don't know whether that's individual or the overall program. I think the overall program is about 1.6 million. So I don't know what the question is, but it may relate to individual projects or individual trainees.
No, it's the whole package.
Oh, okay, the whole package.
So the legislative change that we're making is just around eliminating that linkage. And so the goal is to try to preserve the Kit and Kerr dollars that we have, which, as Steve said, are about 1.6 or so a year for the companies that really want those Kit and Kerr awards. So we don't yet have the fiscal note on the other HPIP bill, if you're wondering about that, the transferability of credits. So I don't know if I didn't answer your question, Jack, send me an email.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I'm not sure that Secretary is still there, but if he is, we did have a final request for his prediction for the Chiefs score this weekend. I think he's gone, so.
No, he's here. He's just frozen.
There he
Oh,
is.
there we go. I think you're good to go. Did you hear that question?
Secretary
I
Total.
didn't.
Okay.
Apparently we need to work on broadband at the Capitol.
The last one is a question, your Chiefs prediction for the score this weekend.
35-27 Chiefs, of course.
There we go. Well, and I think you missed it earlier, and I think he's turned it off. But Jose, oh, he still has his Tampa Bay background, so you may need to talk to your staff.
Oh, Jose, come on, man. Letting us down here.
Or maybe it'll be former staff.
And those are all the questions that I had.
Well, thanks everybody for having me on. I really appreciate it. I'm sorry we're having bandwidth problems on this end, but grateful to all of the friends and colleagues who are on this call who are KDA members, and I can't wait to get back out and see people again and get in the car and go look at sites and have the kind of conversations that we normally do. So hope to see you all soon. Thanks so much, and go Chiefs.
Go Chiefs. That's right. Thank you, David. Appreciate it. I want to remind everybody, again, the Framework for Growth is being released tomorrow, February 4th, 10 o'clock in the morning, Governor Kelly. The full document will be available on the Department of Commerce's webpage tomorrow. That's kansascommerce.gov. And they're inviting KEDA members to watch the press conference on the governor's Facebook page. And that is facebook.com/GOVLAURA Kelly. Wanted to mention that. Now we are right on time. It's just a couple minutes after 2. And so we will turn now to the Secretary of Transportation, Julie Lorenz. Julie Lorenz was appointed by Governor Kelly in January of 2019 to lead the Kansas Department of Transportation. With more than 25 years experience, she is recognized as a national leader in the areas of policy development, collaboration, and scenario planning. Previously, Lorenz directed national engineering firms, strategic consulting, and public engagement services for transportation projects at the local, regional, and national levels. Lorenz led research for Transportation Research Board on topics such as long-term and emerging trends in transportation and how to create and sustain a culture of innovation for state departments of transportation. She's currently serving on the executive committee of the TRB and is chairing the Council on Aviation for the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials. She's a graduate of KU, where she earned a Master of Arts degree in Organizational Psychology, and Drury University, where she earned Bachelor of Science degrees in Psychology and Business Administration. Her role of secretary is her second tour of duty for KDOT, as she served as the Director of Public Affairs from 2003 to 2011. It is always a pleasure to hear from her, so I will now turn the mic over to Secretary Lorenz.
Thank you, Steve. Good to see you. And I've seen a couple of
Yep.
familiar faces, across the portrait bar. So I look forward to the day that we can all be back together. I think I've got some slides if someone can help me out with that. Thank you. All right. Thank you so much. I'm here today to talk about how transportation is here to work for you and with you. Next slide, please. So truly, I do believe, we talk about roads and bridges as part of transportation, but that is not at all the only thing that we are. We are here to serve people. We are very focused on trying to make KDOT a more people-centered business, people-centered enterprise. So when I talk about transportation, I want to talk about the work that we can do to support communities, to support our economy and our health. So next slide. And there are lots of ways that we do that. Next slide. And is there, okay, good. So the first is like at the very core, we provide some essential sorts of things. The infrastructure so that you have emergency services like fire and rescue and air ambulance, those sorts of things. Getting kids to school safely and making sure that we are able to clear the highways so that you can get products to market. So those are all the real essential things that we provide that day in and day out we need regardless of the weather. Next slide. They also help move the Kansas economy. So important to note. And, we need to think about what are some of our natural advantages, and we need to leverage those natural advantages. One is being in the middle of the country. So we are within 2 days drive of 85% of all Americans. So that provides us with some great natural advantages in terms of being a logistics hub. You need a healthy infrastructure system to be able to deliver goods and services cost effectively. We're a net export state in terms of ag. So to the extent we can drive down delivery time or costs, our businesses are either going to be more profitable or our products are going to be more competitive, or hopefully both. You see the drone in the bottom right-hand corner. We're the air aviation capital of the world, and UAS, David talked a little bit about that. That's going to help keep us at the forefront of aviation. Just last November, we were the first authorized state in the nation to do a beyond line of sight flight, which means currently you need to have a person that has eyes on a drone. The driver of the drone doesn't have to be able to see it, but you have to have someone in the field who can. Because we have such wide open airspaces, and in collaboration with K-State, we did the first beyond line of sight. No human eyes had an eye on that drone, and it had to navigate between bugs and birds and all sorts of things. But it's that innovative technology piece that will help drive our economy and keep us at the forefront. And then that picture at the top left, really broadband investments are going to help us flip the script on the way we think about economic development and jobs. So yes, transportation still needs to get people to work. We need shorter commute times, safer commutes, but also by expanding broadband more cost effectively, people can be at home and jobs can come to them. So those are all important things for us to consider as to why transportation investments are so important to the Kansas economy. Next slide. And then this is really at the heart and soul. So I appreciate that your jobs are to bring new business to Kansas, but man, we need to keep the good businesses we have and the communities that we have healthy and thriving. And we do that through good transportation investments. So it could be shorter commutes that I just talked about. It could be better access to existing businesses. It can be things like having better sidewalks in communities. And we have lots of programs in the new IKE program that are available for funding, lots of ways to partner with communities. It could be trails, bike trails, and pedestrian facilities. Lots of ways to make our communities healthier, safer, and more welcoming. Next slide. So there's lots of reason that I am thankful and grateful today for the Eisenhower Legacy Transportation Program. It is the framework for the next 10 years that helps us make good investments to help future-proof those investments. It's a $9.9 billion program over the next 10 years to strengthen infrastructure and to create more economic growth opportunities for our state. But I'd also point out a couple of other things. This bill passed with 4 hours to spare before the legislature went home for an abbreviated session due to COVID. And it passed with more than 90% approval. Transportation is one of those beautiful things that enjoys bipartisan support, and I am so very thankful and grateful for that. It also is a program that serves urban and rural communities. So it is literally, transportation is literally the thing that can bring us together, that can knit us together and create connections across party lines and across the urban and rural areas. Next slide. So IKE, the new program, combines some of the best of the old program, and it has some new opportunities. So you all are familiar with things like the economic development program that we've had for many years, bike and pedestrian projects, transit projects. And we have some new and reinstated programs. Preservation Plus is a program that when we're out doing preservation work and we open up a trench to do some pavement replacement, we'll go ahead and offer that space to telecoms so that they can get broadband access delivered more cost effectively across the state. There's also the broadband program that we administer in conjunction with the Department of Commerce. Other things like the Innovative Technology Grant Program, the Short Line Rail Program, that for the first time we're getting short line rail access to some of our most rural communities. And, you know, just like your kids, you love all your kids. But every once in a while, there might be a day where one kid just does something that you're just a little extra happy with them. And I want to talk to you a little bit about the new cost share program and why I think it's especially helpful to the Kansas communities. Next slide. Okay, cost share, I think, really epitomizes the principles under the IKE program. We want to work in partnership with communities, have lots of options to take a look at as we try to solve problems, because at the end of the day, that's what we're here to do. We're here to work with you, not start with no, to start with when asked a question, let's take a look at what our options are so that we can deliver good solutions to communities. Next slide. So here are a couple of examples of some cost share projects. First, the North Junction project in Wichita. That is an interchange that's one of the highest priorities in the state. More than 160,000 vehicles travel through this part of the city each and every day, and it's a pretty significant bottleneck. We do not have enough money to take it all on at once, so we just keep chipping away at it, and I'm appreciative that folks are so patient with all the orange barrels that just go on year after year. This is a good example of where we put $25 million into a project. Wichita came up with 7.5 so that we can keep work going on. I appreciate Andrew Weems, his comment from the Wichita Regional Chamber, where he points out it's a good example of how states, cities, and counties can work together. We recently got another award for this project that includes some federal money. So we're just going to keep chipping at it. As he notes, these kinds of projects create jobs and they deliver long-term economic opportunities. Next slide. This is a good story coming out of Parsons. So 21st Street, 2 bridges. The bridges themselves are sound, but the decks are in bad shape. And under the previous T-Works program, too bad. No KDOT programs were available. There are no federal programs. It's a project that cost about $700,000 and Parsons wasn't able to get to the redecking. KDOT, under the new cost share program, we've put in $500,000 and the city is putting in about $175,000 so we can redeck those bridges. Now, here's the fun part of the story. So literally, the fire chief's name is Jay Hawks. And what he has pointed out is that if you had to route around the 21st Street area, you would add 3 to 5 minutes to that trip. And in an emergency situation, minutes can make the difference between life and death. So we're very happy to partner with Parsons. And again, it's this quality of life piece. It's being able to have healthier communities and better access to essential services. So very happy with this project. The next one. And Belle Plaine. All right. Now this is, I think, an awesome example of both cost share as well as problem solving. So Belle Plaine, small town, about 1,500 people. BNSF went in and double tracked through that area. And now they see about 10 trains per hour on average. And the trains have to blow 2 long, 1 short blast in warning. This is day after day, hour after hour, disrupts football practice, sleep, church, wedding vows, day after day after day. The community worked for 6 years to raise $100,000. KDOT is going to put in $66,000. And by the end of this year, that will be enough money to essentially create these double berms on either side, which creates a safety barrier, and the trains will no longer have to blow their horns. Now think about what that does for quality of life for this community. It might not be something that you would typically think of in terms of a transportation improvement, but it absolutely is critical. And look at what Robin says here. This is a shot in the arm. People are encouraged because small town America really does have a voice in this world. Great story. Next. So this cost share program, so far we've invested about $65 million, and about $42 million has been invested by communities that help projects all across the state. And I encourage each of your members to pay attention to when we issue calls for projects. This is one of our most popular programs, and it's the one where we really spend a lot of time to look for some of those good projects that might not otherwise be able to be funded within any other program. Lots of flexibility in this one. Okay, next slide. Okay, a couple of things I want to note in terms of our biggest program, which is obviously highway construction. We have nearly doubled our construction lettings, and I want to say very clearly, thanks to both the governor and the legislature. Under the governor's budget, she intends to close the bank by the Bank of KDOT by 2023, and that's absolutely critical so that we can see so that we can improve the health of our infrastructure system. Next slide. What's important to note is while the lettings indicate the amount of work we're putting out, those typically pay out 2 to 3 years at a time. So these are dollars, the project payments that go directly into the economy each year. And so you can see in 21, we estimate about $420 million going directly into really good paying jobs for construction. Next slide. Now, in terms of an economic recovery, you know, I'd be here to pitch. There are some really fantastic benefits associated with infrastructure investment, whether that's on the broadband side, on bridges, in transit. Those are dollars that go immediately into the bloodstream of the economy. But just as importantly, they provide long-term lasting benefits. I can't think of a better picture than the Amelia Earhart Bridge in Atchison, which was built back in the WPA days. We are working hard so that we'll be ready to deliver should the Biden administration come through with a big infrastructure package. And I pulled together a stimulus prep team, next slide, made up of construction companies and engineers and KDOT folks. And we can go to the next slide, and I'll show you some results of that work that we've been doing over the summer. There we go. Okay, so in April, after Ike was passed and the governor signed it, we had 13 projects that could be let within 1 year. Because remember, the pipeline itself was empty after years of withdrawals from the Bank of KDOT without repayments. We had no projects sitting on the shelf. What we've got are leftover T-Works projects that we're working hard to deliver, but nothing new on the shelf. Since April, we now have 50 projects that could be let within 1 year. More importantly, 133 projects that could be let within fiscal year 2023. Often these stimulus dollars are targeted for shovel-ready projects because the intent is to get people to work. So you can see, I'm very pleased with the work that the KDOT team and our private sector partners have been doing so that we can be ready to go should we have the opportunity to access some of those funds. Next slide. Now, We did receive some COVID relief funds. So this is separate and apart from what I hope will be a large stimulus program. The COVID relief money came at the end of the year, and the governor and I, depending on weather, are supposed to be doing a press conference on this tomorrow, but I'm happy to share some of this information with you today. We received about $84 million. What we want to do is put between 25 and 40 million into preservation work, again, increasing the health of our transportation system. We would put between 10 and 15 million into those local partnership projects, cost share, local bridges, that sort of thing. I'm sensitive to the fact that some communities have really suffered through high employment and other sorts of things. So we will take that into consideration as we make project selections under the partnership project. And then we also recognize that motor fuels tax. We saw about a $37 million decline in motor fuels tax receipts last year. We want to share back some of this money with the locals. So we'll take 12.5, which is what we've estimated local communities have not received, and we'll be issuing that back to local communities so that their budgets are made whole relative essentially to gas tax. I'd like to also point out, and I saw in the chat a little earlier, I learned a lot through that Spark process. And one thing I learned, I can tell you, is that recovery dollars, when they're wrapped in red tape, don't really provide great relief. We had some nursing homes that did not take some of the PPE money because they said there were just too many requirements for federal reporting with that PPE money. So having taken that lesson, when we send this money out for the locals, it will be in a federal fund swap sort of approach. So we will send them state dollars, just like the motor fuels dollars would have been coming to them, so that they don't have to worry about those reporting requirements. KDOT will take on that task. So we're happy to work with our locals because it really is a partnership. When you think about our state system, and we have over 104, we have about 10,000 miles, but roads and bridges altogether about 140,000. And if the state system isn't working well with the local systems, then people don't have great access. They don't have great safety. So I take our partnership with our local governments very seriously. Okay, next slide. So with that, I have an ask, Steve, of your group. So here's the thing. When you have a community problem and there is a transportation component, let us know, okay? We will work hard to see if there isn't a program in our portfolio that can't be helpful to you. We recognize we have a responsibility for helping our communities to be as healthy and as strong as possible. There isn't always a transportation component, but when there is, we want to be at the table and try to find ways to solve problems. So with that, I'll stop and see if you have any questions.
Thank you, Julie. I haven't seen any yet, but are there any, Janet, that you have?
I did receive one, and Julie, it's more of a question moving forward. And you mentioned a little bit about the decline in gas tax. And certainly as more people are working from home, at least intermittently, has the state started to think about, and I know I've been in some meetings where I know you have, but what are you looking at for alternative taxes and some possibilities along those lines?
Sure, I appreciate the question. It's a really important one. So there are two pieces. 2 years ago, a small registration fee was passed on electric vehicles. And I think it's like, $125, $150. It's not a huge amount. It's not raising a huge amount of money. But the point is we're prepared for the future. So the mechanism exists. Again, like it's all about being ready. So that's one thing I'd say. The other thing I'd say, and I want to say this like carefully and clearly. There is no doubt. I mean, I think what was it? GM said by 2035, there are a whole bunch of vehicles that will only be produced as electric vehicles. So I appreciate the question, Jenna. So I would like to initiate a study. We've actually submitted a grant application to do a vehicle miles traveled study in Kansas. It's just a conversation. It's just to get more voices at the table, but I am here to tell you the East Coast and the West Coast are doing tons of work on this idea of paying by the mile you drive, not based on the kind of fuel you use, the amount of fuel you use. If we aren't part of that conversation, the coasts are going to tell us how that's going to roll out, and whether that rolls out in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, it will happen eventually, and our voices should be at the table. I recognize there are privacy concerns. We are not going to get into that whole discussion as part of this study because it's entirely opt-in. And I've had some good conversations actually with a couple of chambers in Kansas where if their members want to opt in and just see what it's like and see what their driving patterns would suggest they might pay. So it's very much a study. Iowa is interested in participating. Minnesota is interested in participating. Oklahoma might be, but we will be stronger if we have a Midwest voice than if we just wait to see what happens. So entirely a study. I would appreciate nobody freaking out about it. It's just for us to start a conversation.
Great, thank you. And kind of an add-on to that question is, as you look at your planning, the local consults, those kinds of visits that in the past have been in person, are there also structural changes that you're looking at potentially happening to put into place to be able to get that local feedback?
Okay, so we will be going out to local consult. Currently, the plan is a target of September. So more typically, it might be sort of more summertime. We're going to push it to September in hopes that they can be in person. We will certainly make adjustments and go virtual if we need to. And I can appreciate all the conferences that have been done virtually. And people are getting way better at Zoom for sure. But if we can be in person, I would certainly prefer that. But we'll just have to sort of see if we can get there. And I see Thomas County and Colby Park. Yes. Yes, I would very much we need the rural perspective. So part of this has to do with equity, right? And if you have to drive 30 to 40 miles to the grocery store. We need to have those kinds of considerations built into the discussion. I'm not saying, I don't know what comes from the discussion, but if we don't have it, we're just going to have to live with whatever we're given. So we should have those rural voices. I very much want rural.
And Julie, I guess maybe a side question from one that I got. If somebody's trying to figure out grant programs that are out there through KDOT, is there a particular section within your website for when you do the notices for release for like your call for projects?
Man, thank you, Janet. So we just launched the Ike website, and there's a page called Community Resources. And if I could give you just, two names. Michelle Needham. So she runs Cost Share. She's fantastic. Think of her as sort of like your, Sherpa wouldn't be quite the right word, but she can help you navigator would be better word. So she can help you navigate, and certainly Todd Salfrank for years and years has been really helpful with like county commissioner types. But I should not get ahead of myself. I will just tell you that we are working very intentionally within the department to figure out how it can be easier to navigate us, because we are committed to being, problem solvers. And so we want it to be easily accessible. We're just not quite ready to roll all that out.
Thank you. And thank you for all the work that you did managing the Office of Recovery.
You're very welcome. Thank you for inviting me today.
Any other questions? Are we good, Janet? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Be safe. Thank you. Buckle up.
Appreciate it a lot. Appreciate your focus on partnership and your willingness to cut red tape. And it's exciting to hear about the federal COVID relief bill. And mostly, I think we appreciate your passion for transportation. So thank you.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.
Yep. We will move to our next presenter. Mike Beam was appointed Secretary of the Kansas Department of Agriculture by Governor Laura Kelly 2 years ago. Beam came to KDA following 38 years of experience in association management of the Kansas Livestock Association. He has served as the Executive Director of Ranchland Trust of Kansas, an affiliate of KLA, for 15 years. He has dedicated his career to assisting farmers and ranchers to advance their policy and public relations needs, and in building highly visible, responsive, and respected organizations. In his role at KLA, he participated and led coalitions in strategizing and implementing legislative and regulatory initiatives. And so let's hear now from Secretary Mike Beam.
Hey, good afternoon. It's a real honor to be invited to listen in and participate I have put together a few slides. I'll try to go through those and respond to questions. Hopefully, this will be on track with what you're wanting to hear. If not, maybe we can get into some questions. But I just thought I'd talk a little bit about the significance of agriculture in Kansas. Just touch real quick on a few legislative issues and maybe some highlight from the industry and what we're looking at as potential in 2021. But, you know, agriculture is many things. I think a lot of us understand it's, you know, raising crops, farming, ranching, grass, but it includes landscape. And when you look at the various sectors, we think that you have to include landscape, horticulture services, pet food, and, you know, farm machinery manufacturing, food processing. I think they're all part of ag. And so collectively, of the 536 sectors in Kansas, we've lumped 71 up into the broad ag category, only through our M-Plan economic analysis for that purpose primarily. But those have nearly a $50 billion impact to the state. And if you looked at direct and indirect or induced, we're looking at over $70 billion. And that makes up, you know, 13% of the workforce. Again, that's 71 sectors out of 534 that we would make the case for being ag related. The thing that's interesting about ag, at least on the production side, is it's still predominantly a family-owned, family-managed business. The last census of agriculture noted that, you know, over 84% are family-owned farms. So it's still the backbone, predominantly the backbone of agriculture. And we rank quite high. The U.S. Census of Agriculture also noted that Kansas is in the top 5. So when you look at California being number 1, Texas number 3, you know, those are states with considerable larger land mass. So, you know, number 5 of all 50 states in our value of ag production. We're first in sorghum. We're very diversified when you look at it. First in sorghum, first in wheat, second in cropland, second in sorghum, third in cattle and calves. There's probably about 15 or 20 subsectors of agriculture by state where we're ranked in the top 10. And you'll see I've listed a couple of these. So it's real diverse, and it's, again, a significant part of the nation's agriculture is in the heartland here in Kansas. This is a kind of a heat map that shows where the value of ag production by location across the United States. You'll see that southwest quadrant of Kansas is one of the darker shaded areas. And it's ironically, it's probably one of the lesser populated areas. Northwest Kansas would be another one, but that's the economic driver. And you can see if you look at the top 10 counties as far as value of ag production, you have those in green, and of course Haskell, which is probably one of the least populated counties, has the largest value of ag production of any county in Kansas.
Mike, let me interrupt right here. We're only seeing that first slide.
Oh,
Yes, so we've missed
oh my God.
everything but that slide.
Well, I don't know what I can do. Let me try this. Is that working?
I'm still looking at the slides, the small slides to the left, the cover slide in the middle. Can you put it in presentation mode?
Is that doing it? Had all these great slides, and now I can't seem to get them.
Okay, so we're close. Now we see all
Now
of
you
your
see
slides.
them all?
Yeah, we see
Okay.
them all, but they're really tiny
Yeah.
thumbnails of everyone.
How's that? Is that any better?
Yeah,
You still have some on the right though, don't you?
yeah, except that we still don't need those.
Well, huh. Well, I don't know how I can change that. I should have been prepared. I'm sorry. I don't know. If somebody has an idea, I'm open to collapsing that right-hand column.
Yeah, if you don't mind us seeing your notes screen, that's fine. If you just
Okay.
want
I'm not
to
following the
keep
notes
that.
anyway, so.
Yeah, that's that's fine.
So this is the heat map I was referencing, where you see where across the United States that southwest quadrant sticks out like some of the areas of California, Iowa, and eastern Nebraska. But these are those top 10 counties I mentioned. In Kansas, as far as value of ag output, and Haskell County is the county that I mentioned did have, at least in 2017, the highest market value of any county in ag in Kansas. And it's I think probably a lot of you can assume that, the animal agriculture, the feeding and processing of meat is probably one of the bigger drivers that causes that to really shine in that southwest quadrant. And then here's these are some ag export numbers that have been made available. Our number one export is meat, and then off to the right is the countries. And Mexico and Canada are very key partners. So the latest USMCA agreement has helped solidify that. And of course, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan are also critical partners. All of those are pretty big importers of meat, and in some cases, grain products. I was going to talk a little bit about our issues. We had several bills that weren't that controversial last year, but a lot of them had to be put on the shelf when they adjourned the session early. So we're getting ready to start our third year in hemp. And so we have a bill to make some changes to our hemp program to align with the new USDA guidelines. Our grain warehouses, we inspect a lot of the grain warehouses to assure that the grain, the volume of grain that's supposed to be on public storage is there, and that the condition is still good. We're going to ask for a fee increase there because that program has been it's been spending more on fee funds than what we've had. Cleanup on animal health license dates, a cleanup on our Division of Conservation Authority, and then some multi-year flex accounts. That has to do with water. It'd be the use of water, especially when you get into a dry period where they can have some flexibility. And raw milk, that bill probably won't go anywhere, but we settled an agreement on a lawsuit a couple of years ago that's saying our raw milk bill was unconstitutional. This is a bill that probably won't go anywhere. Believe it or not, there's a lot of controversy around that topic. Just some highlights of 2020. I shared some of this today with the House Appropriations Committee, but as some of you may know, last spring, starting there in kind of an early April, May, and into early June, it was a pretty stressful time as these processing plants all across the country, particularly the pork producing states in the upper Midwest, started closing or at least cutting back on their processing. And you can see that, the beef and pork processing numbers really dropped. And in Kansas, we process about 25% of the nation's fed cattle supply. So the fed cattle numbers were backing up. There's just a lot of stress that occurred last spring. And that resulted in a considerable price drop. You'll see that on the pig prices, they dropped considerably there in April, May. And again, they dropped later in July because of supply. Slaughter steers, there again, that April, May period was really rough because they were getting backed up and prices were kind of tanking. But, there's some other positives that occurred. Grain sorghum is a commodity that didn't really see a price decline. In fact, the last part of the year, and they've really rallied, which has been a pretty positive news, particularly the sorghum areas of South Central and Western Kansas. And wheat, back in March, and then again in June at harvest time, our wheat prices were down there to the point that it's been the reason we're planting a lot fewer acres of wheat. In fact, it's about half the wheat acreage that there was 30 years ago. But that's rallied, and there's probably some, I think the last report I just saw this morning, we're having more wheat acres planted for this fall than we've had last year. And corn's the same way, it took a dive there in the spring when that pandemic was really causing lots of supply chain disruptions. Soybeans, but the good news is you'll see the latter part of 2020 and early 21, it's much stronger. So last year, the markets were very volatile. Crop yields were strong in most regions of the state. We had some pretty droughty areas of Western Kansas that didn't fare so well. The livestock markets rebounded. Exports have picked up considerably, which is part of the reason our grain prices have rallied. Things have really changed. 2020 was quite a year. Even as late as September of 2020, USDA projected that net farm income would be considerably lower than 2019. And then in December, they revised those projections and basically said U.S. net farm income is going to be up considerably, thanks a lot to the federal payments made through the COVID relief legislation. In fact, it could be the highest since 2013. And so we changed from going from pretty low to kind of a record on net farm income. But one thing I want to mention is this may not be completely indicative in Kansas, because probably the sector that took the largest hit was the livestock sector. Even though there were some of those payments that were made to owners of livestock, I'm sure it didn't make them whole. And because over 50% of our cash receipts, net farm cash receipts, come from beef cattle, we probably won't have quite as much of a increase in net farm income in Kansas that other states may enjoy. So looking ahead, this bothers me. This is something that I think about. I can't do much about it. But if I had a slide up here of the drought situation in Colorado, it would be basically all that red. So that's the wild card here. You can't have a profitable year if you don't raise anything. And there's a lot of other implications that occur under drought. So I'm hopeful that as we get into spring and the growing season, that red and these other colors starts diminishing, and that we can have a good growing season. If we have a major drought like we did in 2012, it'll be pretty rough on several sectors of ag and rural communities. This is kind of the overall outlook, and you see that's why I'm concerned that the dark brown is what's predicted to be persistent drought. So that even increases through about half of the state under these projections. So there's other issues out there. Ethanol is not really ag sector. It's in the fuel side, but it's a huge purchaser of grain. So, as you were talking, and Secretary Lorenz was talking about less fuel usage, that has its impact on ethanol, and then of course has its impact on grain prices and grain demand. The other thing, will exports continue to trend higher? That's a key driver for Kansas Ag, and that's the uncertainty. That's what caused one of the things that caused considerable fluctuation last year. So that's an unknown. Will our food service demand pick up as a lot of our restaurant and hospitality industries hopefully will gear back up. And a couple of things I'll close with. In 2019, we started an Ag Stress website. We didn't create the content, but we started pulling together what's out there, working with K-State Research and Extension, Iowa State University, some ag organizations, and developed this website called Kansas Ag Stress. We did this in October 2019, not knowing the level of stress that would be there in 2020. And so we noted there were 2,563 visits on that website in 2020. What I think is interesting is that the average visit on that website was 18 minutes. So we all know how averages are determined. We know there was a lot of people that were just on there checking it out. Some people spent considerable time on that site, and I'm sure that was due to stress. The good news is that these numbers in 2020 are down considerably. So maybe that's reflective of the price enhancements that I showed earlier. Steve, there is another slide. It's a PDF, and if I can, I'd like to show that, then open it to questions if I've got time.
Yeah, that's fine.
I don't know for sure how to get out of this. Here we go. Okay. Whoops. Can you see that slide?
Not yet.
Say you can?
No.
Oh, darn. Okay.
Mr. Secretary, what you'll need to do is hit the share screen button at the bottom, and then it'll give you the option of sharing your PDF.
Thanks for the help. Now, how we doing?
Yep.
So one of the bright spots, and I'm glad somebody thanked Secretary Lorenz for the role that she played in the Office of Recovery, because I don't know how she did it, fulfilling that responsibility while her cabinet position. But we had the chance to work with the Office of Recovery and the Department of Commerce in utilizing some of the CARES funding for what we call securing local food system grants. A lot of this was rolled out by the Department of Commerce with some input that we had, and then towards the end, we end up providing case managers. But this provided 257 grants out to 80 counties for $11.5 million. And so you should see in some of these smaller well, not all small rural communities, because you'll see by category, these smaller processing plants, they were able to use about $4.5 million. Direct to consumer marketers from producers to growers was almost $3 million. And then food processing. But there was 26 smaller grocery stores that accessed over $1 million, 54 food bank, pantry, and soup kitchens, some registered farmers markets. So the bottom there shows where the fund. You're not going to be able to read the legends, really small. So again, 80 counties, and I'm hoping that injected some capital and some economic activity that will be sustained across Kansas from that $11.5 million grant program. So I'm happy to respond to any questions. I hope that touches on what you all had in mind.
Perfect. That was a very interesting presentation. Really appreciate it. Janet, I see we have at least one question. Do you want to read that for the secretary?
Sure. We do have a question in regard to how do we expect to see carbon credits utilized by Kansas in the future?
I'm hoping we'll know that soon. I know the soon-to-be U.S. Secretary of Agriculture in his confirmation hearing responded to that question and basically said that we should be watching for changes in the USDA conservation programs to provide incentive-based programs for producers to help basically enhance the storage of carbon. So I think there's lots of dollars that flow through the state NRCS offices that go out to counties and then on the land for conservation. And it appears that there's going to be some of that redirected towards producers who will adopt practices to enhance the storage of carbon. I think a lot of the practices that our producers do are a net provider or net winner for storing carbon and reducing carbon. But it looks like USDA is going to pivot towards putting more emphasis on providing financial incentives for that, which I've told people even before this administration took office last month that agriculture is probably more of a solution to climate change than it is the cause, and we can be of help. I would guess that our Division of Conservation may have some role in that, but we'll know more, I think, in the next 60 days. And then the other thing is, the Farm Bill is every 5 years. And so they're going to start looking at, I think 2023 will be the year of the next Farm Bill. And this will give this administration the opportunity to put forth their programs. And so more's coming, but I'm pretty confident there's going to be opportunities for our Kansas farmers and ranchers to participate in programs that help minimize carbon.
Thank you, sir.
All right, I think that's all the questions we have. Mr. Secretary, we really appreciate you taking time out from your afternoon to present to this group. This organization represents people in all four corners of the state of Kansas, and so we understand the importance to the entire Kansas economy, what the ag sector brings to it. So we really appreciate your perspective. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And again, I was honored to be asked to participate. Good luck to all of you.
Thank you. I am going to use Janet's word. It's Janet's word now because she mentioned it. Actually, after I mentioned it first, pivot to Mr. Robinson in Salina, who will be introducing at least one of our sponsors, and then I think the speaker is on the call right now, and we'll get into the last half of our presentation this afternoon. So Mitch, take it away.
All right, glad to be here today, and it's great that we've got we had 130 people register for this event, so that even surpasses our live events over the last several years. So we may be seeing a trend here to some degree. It's still hard to believe that most of us haven't been in Topeka for any meetings for months and maybe a year. It's been a long time. So anyway, we still have to do our jobs, and by us going to this type of meeting, we are still able to learn more, keep up to date with what is going on in Topeka. So it's great to be with you all today. We do have two sponsors that have helped with expenses for this event today. And the first one, I'm going to call on two representatives, Tiffany Stovall and Danica Rome, are here to talk about Kansas manufacturing solutions. So if they would come on, we'll hear from them.
Well, good afternoon. Unfortunately, our CEO had to step out, so I am the only one presenting on behalf of Kansas Manufacturing Solutions. But thank you again for allowing us to be a sponsor of KEDA. In following with your legislative update, our CEO, Tiffany Stovall, was requested actually to speak in front of the United States Senate for a subcommittee for manufacturing. And it was called Examining the American Manufacturing Industry's Response to the COVID-19 Pandemic. And if you want to, I'm going to continually tell you to go to our website at www.wearekms.com, spelled out wearekms.com. And you can watch her provide her testimony and answer questions for the United States Senate. It was really great. So if you're not familiar with us, again, go to our website. We offer services and consultation to all of Kansas manufacturers. And we would like to be a conduit between you and those manufacturers in helping connect them to resources. So two things I want to share real quick is we offered a 2020 manufacturing industry questionnaire. And if you, again, go to our website, you can see the report out and the results of that. We are already looking at spring of 2021 in doing our next one. So what we would ask is that you share this questionnaire with your manufacturers in your local areas and request that they do respond, because the results are very telling and they really put us in a position to make the best determination of what area of solutions will have the best impact for them. Also, if you have a minimum number of manufacturers that respond in your area, we are happy to do a customized results report for you, which can be used for obviously figuring out and better understanding the demographics in your area, but also for marketing. Secondly, LINK, L-I-N-K, has been delayed due to COVID. LINK is a business assessment that we're going to be offering to local EDC organizations. And unfortunately, due to COVID, it does require face-to-face more of those business retention calls. So it's been pushed again to summer of 2021. But please stay tuned, because we would like to offer that through KEDA and all of its members. Last but not least, I hope I'm not at my 2 minutes. If you're not on the list to receive our quarterly newsletter, please go online and do that, because there's a lot of initiatives and resources that you can share with your manufacturers, which include a subsidized employer handbook with a COVID addendum. That's something that we're pushing right now at no charge for manufacturers. So please visit our website, and thanks again for allowing us to sponsor.
Danica, we greatly appreciate your sponsorship of our event today and look forward to learning more about your organization as you all work on your website and your other programs. So thank you for coming today. Next, our other sponsor is Black Hills Energy. Unfortunately, they don't have a representative here today. He got tied up with some business in the energy sector, but they greatly helped us. And when you see any of the representatives you know from Black Hills, please thank them. So next, we have a speaker. Actually, he's the speaker, if you want to say it properly, Speaker of the House, Ron Reichman. He represents District 78. He and his wife live in Olathe. He's been serving the residents of the state of Kansas since 2013 in the House. So he's going to bring us an update from what's going on. Well, for him, it would be across the street in the old days, but he is there in the Capitol building, and we're going to turn this over to Mr. Speaker. So please welcome today.
Well, thanks, Mitch, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to share a little bit with you guys today. Obviously, you guys alluded to, this is a different setting, but we're all kind of going through these things. And one of the things that kind of always disappointed me, so many of us said, man, 2020 is awful. And oh, I can't wait for 2020 to be over. Well, now we're in 2021. What are we doing differently? I think the biggest thing is our attitude and our positive type of things we can do. You know, COVID, obviously, it's a very powerful disease or virus. It affects different people differently. It actually put me in the hospital for a while. For some people, it just affects their taste and smell. But it definitely doesn't discriminate when it comes to the amount of time you have to spend in isolation or quarantine. And so, we've got to do everything we can to respect the virus and find ways. And that's what we've done here at the Capitol. We're trying to find ways to continue to do the work that we were sent here to do. We look for positive things. One of the most positive things that's what's happened is in our committee process, the transparency of it. Almost every committee hearing we have is on YouTube. Folks can testify from the comfort of their own home or offices all over the state. Our House floor looks a little differently. We have over half our chairs removed, and folks either vote up in the gallery or they vote down on the floor. But we're in a position where we can continue to work through this and operate and do what you're sent us to do. We have a tremendous opportunity to help our state recover. It's probably, I tell our members all the time, it's probably the most important time you could be in the legislature is right now to help our state through these trying times and find ways to spur economic development and also bring the checks and balances. And so we're excited to do that. A lot of things that we're working on to help us through that especially with the COVID response, is we want to make sure we get the right liability protections in place. Our business can come back to work. We want to make sure we have the right checks and balances in place. And so we're not having just one department make decisions that decide who's essential and who's not, that we have the ability to continue to operate. There's a lot of bills that we passed last year that we're going to repass this year. Unfortunately, the governor might have vetoed. She vetoed them last year. We're hopeful this year she won't. A lot of things I think are very crucial to our recovery. One was the Kansas Promise Act that passed last year. We're going to pass it again, which basically matched up our students with sectors of the business world that need workforce development. And it's either a 2-year program or a trade program that's free of cost as long as you promise to stay in the state of Kansas, continue to work. We'll pass that again. Hopefully this year we get the governor's support for that. There's a property tax transparency bill that came out last year that will come through this year that will hopefully stop our automatic property tax increases. There's an economic loan program. We have about $60 million of idle funds that we're going to give to our banks and our credit unions that they can loan to small businesses at very, very low interest rates. Again, unfortunately, that was vetoed last year, but we're going to pass it again. I think we have signals that the governor will support this time. We had a first-time home buyer program that we're going to run again. That basically acts like a 529 college savings account. We're going to encourage people to stay in Kansas, that folks, especially even smaller communities, can put money in a fund to attract the type of profession they'd like to attract. So I think a lot of folks can take advantage of that. And so, there's a lot of things that we want to continue to work through to make Kansas the best place we can be. We think that it's a tremendous opportunity now to set Kansas in the right path going forward. And with you guys' help, how do we attract and also retain the businesses that we have? Unfortunately, we were hitting a bit of a stumbling block. I'm sure all of you have been flooded with calls concerning our unemployment trust fund. I don't have a lot of good news to share there. Right now, Kansas is number 2 in the nation for number of unemployment claims. Right now, Illinois is the only state that's has more claims than Kansas. We have more claims. This is not per capita. This is total claims. More claims than California. We have more claims than New York. This is not something to be proud of. The majority of the claims are fraudulent. The federal government, the business community, the legislature has been warning the department for months, going all the way back to March, that organized crime and overseas folks were coming in and getting to the system and manipulating the information. And to a point now that our $1 billion trust fund is basically not existent. And it's really coming to light now with all the 1099-Gs that are coming to our employees. And there's a lot of frustration, a lot of fraud. I hate to just put up a slide to kind of give you an idea of what we're talking about. The top slide is the US trend. This high graph is what happened in March when we had the shutdowns. That's a big unemployment claims. Then it leveled off. Bottom is Kansas. We had the same trend. Within about October, it has started to skyrocket again. We have about 1.5 million folks that want to work in Kansas. We've had over 1 million claims. And so it has been a frustration. A lot of our businesses will not know this was going to hit them so hard until they get their term sheets or their charge sheets in October, November, December. So unfortunately, you won't just be talking about our utility rates and talking about our taxes, but you also be talking about unemployment rates for businesses that you're trying to attract and retain. But right now, we're still in the gathering information stage. I don't have a lot of good answers. I just know we have a big issue coming. That wasn't just for businesses, it's also a lot of our nonprofits, our schools, or universities. They had a record number of fraudulent claims. There's the Washburn University in Topeka had about 600 claims. Almost all but 3 were fraudulent claims. They're part of the reimbursement, so they actually technically on the hook for half that money. But so there's a lot of things going on there. Unfortunately, our claims skyrocketed. I think to kind of put some numbers in perspective, a week that we had 66,000 claims in Kansas, Nebraska had 2,700, Missouri had 11,000. We think there's $200 to $400 million that's already gone. A lot of it hit a bank account and then was transferred overseas. So you'll hear a lot about that. I'm sure it's gonna be a frustration for a lot of our businesses. Unfortunately, it could be used against us when we're trying to recruit and retain our businesses going forward, because you guys all know that our employment insurance is a true cost, just like our tax bills and our utility bills and our property and all those things. So we have committees talking through this, trying to find ways to reform. We will have a new bill to help reform the system the best we can. A lot of us worked really hard in 2013 and 14 and built that trust fund up to $1 billion. To see it all go out from a lot of it fraudulently, it's been disappointing. Not what I don't like being the bearer of bad news, especially when I started with got to be positive about 2021 and find ways to promote our state. We still can. It's just we have another obstacle, maybe an opportunity to shine. And so a lot going on here in Topeka. Very busy and lots of fronts. I'd love to hear what's on your mind and see if you have any questions.
Mitch, you're muted.
Forgot my coffee mug that says you're on mute. It's beautiful.
I keep clicking it. I guess I got to click harder. So Janet, do you have any questions for the speaker?
There have not been any put in the chat.
Okay. Look, I'll
I don't
ask
know if Carrie's had any message to her.
the recent shutdown of the DOL site. Will those improvements that were made, I think it was over 3 days, will that help our issue with the hackers?
Yeah, it's what we're hearing so far. All reports are yes. In fact, I think the morning they turned it on yesterday, they had about 360,000 folks that tried, or bots that tried, that were blocked. The department was saying they were blocking about 2,500 a day. And so you can see a lot we're still getting through. We also have concerns about identity theft and for our citizens and what could have happened there. But it looks like this fix so far is working. Of course, we won't know. We probably won't know until a week and a half from now when we can see. This week we'll have some pent up claims based on being down for 3 days. For the following week, we get the reports, we'll have a better idea. But we think, we're hopeful that the security measures put in place, finally, again, the warning signs have been coming since March from the federal government, from the business employees, from the legislature. We're grateful that they finally took steps, but it's a problem and we're gonna have it for a while.
All right, do we have anybody have any questions? We're gonna.
Mitch, I'll jump in. Mr. Speaker, thank you. This is Andrew from Wichita. Thank you for those comments. And I know businesses across the state continue to hear about the UI fraud situation as it's grown, as you've highlighted. So thank you for addressing that. Shifting a little bit, we've heard from Lieutenant Governor Secretary Toland and other secretaries today. Any chance we can get kind of brief thoughts from your perspective and from leadership on some of the, I know there's a lot of bills, more than 300 in the first few weeks of session, so I don't envy the task of you and your team, but there's been some bills specific to economic development legislation. The HPIP and Kit and Kerr bundling bill comes to mind that you might be able to speak to from a leadership perspective.
Well, I think a lot of, like I said, a lot of the economic development tools we passed last year, and a lot of them were vetoed. And so we'll send those back through, maybe make a few tweaks so we can make them become laws. We definitely need them. You know, some of those tax bills come through. Obviously, you guys know how to get a hold of me to kind of keep your pulse and let us know what's important to you and what's not. We want to make this the best business climate we possibly can, and are open to using the tools that have been available, and ones that we have to continue with, we want to be supportive of. Again, we want to use the tools, but if they're not ones you guys still need, we can change them out from ones you do.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, well, Mr. Speaker, we appreciate you taking the time out. We know you've got a busy afternoon every day during the session. And again, we want to thank you for coming and visiting with us. And we look forward to seeing more positive activity during the remainder of the session.
Great. Well, thanks for all you guys do for Kansas. Take a good day. Take care.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Those of you all who've been in economic development a long time, or maybe just a short time, you know, you have to pivot sometimes, as that word's been used before. But today we had an opening, and then we had somebody that stepped up to help fill in for an opening. Unfortunately, Representative Tarwater had, he said he'd rather go to a K through 12 budget meeting than come with us. So hopefully we'll have him next year as head of the Commerce Committee. But David Sofer is you get the right exact title, Legislative and Policy Director for the Department of Commerce. So David, I know you've met with Steve and several of us either on the phone talking about this session, and you all have got a big agenda, and where it looks like some really exciting things the Lieutenant Governor laid out for us. So we'll let you take some time and talk about what you wanted to talk about.
Thank you. First of all, appreciate the opportunity to chat with you all. I know this was kind of put together last minute, so I don't necessarily have quote unquote prepared remarks, but I know the secretary had touched on a lot of the legislative items, so I don't want to necessarily duplicate with the efforts that the secretary and Lieutenant Governor had put together. I do want to mention the reason why I did want to hop on is there is going to be a tremendous opportunity for a KDA next week. So Senate agenda is going to be announced here. I want to say sometime in the next hour or so. So what you're going to see is they've decided to pretty much run nearly all of our pending bills right now. So currently we have 5 of the 10 pending bills, 5 of the 10 legislative items that the Lieutenant Governor had talked about. So when it comes to angel investor tax credit and kicker HPIP, that's going to be taken up tomorrow. We had hearings on them this week. The Senate's going to try to kick them out tomorrow so they can take them up on the floor next week. House has already done the same for those 2. And then we have 3 other bills that have bill numbers. So that's the HPIP tax credit transferability, Star Bonds, and Rural Housing Incentive District. So what the Senate has decided to do is pretty much take up all items commerce next week. I think for those of us that have been around for quite a few years, certainly the opportunity to have Senate Commerce be able to take up all these items that pertain to commerce all in one week, nonetheless, is a tremendous opportunity, one we certainly welcome. So it's kind of a good problem to have, but on the flip side, there's a lot of people that we need to inform that we've got all these items coming up next week, and we really need to have those voices out there, be able to be heard, get testimony in, whether you can appear in person or remotely, or just provide written testimony. I think it's so incredibly important for the committee. There's a lot of new members to Senate Commerce. And so it's tremendously important for us to be able to make sure our voices are heard and be able to get out our support for these initiatives. So I just kind of wanted to go over quickly that schedule coming up. And then certainly I'm happy to answer any questions that there are on the legislative side. But so on Monday, Senate Commerce is going to be taking up our ERO to move tourism back to commerce. And I should mention Senate Commerce meets 10:30. I will provide the information to KDA if you need to with the committee assistance. You could get in testimony, but again, it's so incredibly important for us to be able to let folks know how important tourism is to economic development, how it's a major economic development engine, and what it can do for your local communities by moving it back to commerce. We're going to make the case, but I know when it comes to a lot of those senators, they want to hear back from home, what the locals think about these moves. And so, if you can help us out with that, that'd be so incredibly helpful. On Tuesday, we're going to have Star Bonds. So that's SB 124. And then on Wednesday, we're going to have the Rural Housing Incentive District and our HPIP tax credit transferability bills. So they're going to try to do both of them in the same day. That's SB 90, SB 91. And then Thursday, we're going to talk about our Department of Commerce budget. So I can't remember since I've been here since 2017, us having that much work in 1 week in front of Senate Commerce. But it's again, it's a new day. We're tremendously appreciative of the fact that Chairman Olson is welcoming this opportunity and giving us the platform to be able to get out there all week long and be able to promote all the different bills, initiatives, the ERO, everything and the like. And so, we welcome it. But again, we really need your help. We really need to be able to send that message that it's not just about, the Department of Commerce, but it's that local impact as well, and what these bills can do for your local communities. If you know businesses that certainly take part in the HPIP program and the tax credit transferability would benefit them, please encourage them to just send a note, even if they don't want to testify, send a note to their local senators or local representatives. Those messages are read, they're heard, and they go so far when it comes to being able to convince folks to vote for these bills. So again, I just wanted to take the time to encourage y'all and being able to get that done, to help us out here, get your message heard. Again, take advantage of the fact that we've got this opportunity here in front of the state legislature. They want to work with us. They want to be able to get economic development bills done. Let's take advantage of that and let's go aggressive, run with it, and let's make some stuff happen this year.
David, the budget bill review, which day was that going to be? Thursday?
Yeah, so we did the House side, reviewed our budget today. They're going to act on it tomorrow, and then the Senate Commerce Committee will review our budget next Thursday. So that is the 11th. And then I'm seeing in the chat here, so I'm hearing HPD has support. What, if any, feedback on SB 91 transferability are you hearing? To be honest with you, we have not necessarily heard a lot on it yet. We haven't really had the opportunity to go and promote the bill heavily at this moment. We've talked generally with some folks. I think there is a little bit of concern with respect to transferability and what that might create on the fiscal side of things, but also just what that means generally. So I think there's a lot of education that goes into, number one, why HPIP tax credits are not being used. The difficulties when it comes to tax liability and the challenges involved for companies being able to use it. So even though we give them 16 years, why there are so many credits that are unused. Number two is being able to show them kind of some other state programs that other states have that are similar to this, and why they've implemented items such as transferability, and sort of why that in being able to implement transferability from the Kansas side would be able to allow us to compete with those states and even potentially give us a leg up on some. And then number three, just again, the importance of HPIP, why it's such an incredibly important incentive, and why being able to give companies that extra benefit of having the transferability in there and what that can do for business in our state when it comes to capital investment and job growth. Don't know if there are any other questions. I know I kind of just went through it and jumped right in there, but.
No, that's what we wanted. What do you think the upcoming bills, other ones, the Lieutenant Governor laid out a pretty broad listing of some of the, the rural programs, the out of state incentives for people to come and work out, be based out of Kansas. What kind of feedback are you getting on those initially?
Yeah, so I think, there are a couple of things. I think once we promote the framework for growth, certainly the SBIR, STTR matching grant program will get tremendous, I believe, support, because I think as a lot of talk has been about kind of building around innovation related companies, being able to help our businesses that are starting out and finding opportunities for them to build and grow. And I think as we are able to produce some of those statistics that show that we're, in kind of like the bottom 5 states as it pertains to those federal programs, being able to capture those federal programs, bringing them here, and being able to match those will be a tremendous impact for our state. And certainly the legislature is always looking for opportunities where if we can draw more federal funds here and provide those resources and opportunities for those companies, they're happy to be able to kick in some of those funds to be able to help make that happen. So I think that'll get support. Specifically on the rural side, I think, first of all, Rural Housing Incentive District is getting tremendous support. We expect that to be able to go through you know, hopefully with the help of some locals and being able to talk about how important it is to their districts or their communities. I think that'll be important. But also, we've talked about Rural Remote Worker Initiative and how, you know, the global economy is headed towards a place where there's going to be a lot more remote workers. And so as we have communities that are struggling to grow out in rural Kansas, we want to be able to kind of tackle that item while also being able to tackle some of the workforce related issues that some of our companies are finding in some of our, more urban population area centers where they're looking for workforce. They see a lot of K-State graduates. They want to be able to recruit them, but maybe those folks don't want to live in cities. And so being able to have an incentive program that provides a cash incentive to be able to recruit rural-based workers, keep them in our rural communities, but also meet the needs of our companies all across our state is so incredibly important. And so the key here with what we're trying to do is we're trying to bring a whole new thought process to the legislature. Whereas, we always talk about PEAK and HPIP and JCF, and HPIP's important. And that's why we're tackling some of that this year. But I think it's also important to be able to introduce new, refreshing ideas, especially now that we're dealing with kind of a pandemic and hopefully getting to a post-pandemic world. It's so incredibly important for us to think outside the box. How do we solve some of these problems that we're going to see specifically as a result of the pandemic, but also that tie into items that we're dealing with pre-pandemic. And so being able to tackle those and kind of get to a place where hopefully once we get past COVID and we get hopefully to some semblance of normal, we've got programs in place that our economy won't see as much of a disruption, and we can be able to kind of climb that hill and get to a point where we're really being able to take off and run with it.
David, the one program that's got a lot of interest is ROS and the discussions around the additional modifications, new tools for that. Could you go into a little bit more detail talking about that?
Sure. So what we did with ROS, so as many of you know, we had a report last year. It showed that people were making decisions not necessarily as a result of the ROS program. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad program. It just means that we've got to be able to weigh what it is we're trying to accomplish with ROS. And I think, what we were able to do is we put together a working group of economic development professionals, legislators, county commissioners, and the like. And we really wanted to be able to dig in. What do rural communities want to see the ROS program be, right? The goal wasn't here for the state to dictate how to solve the problem. We wanted local input. We wanted folks that are out and living in our rural communities that deal with this issue every day, be able to help address and be able to put together a program that makes the most sense long-term that will help the state of Kansas and our rural communities. So what we came up with as a result of probably 6 months of work was we put together a plan, and it should be introduced here, I want to say in the next couple of weeks. But if you want to keep ROS as is, we want you to do that. We don't want to take that away from you. If ROS is working for you as is, there is no reason why the state should be able to take that away. But for those that don't necessarily see ROS as the perfect solution for them, one of the biggest feedbacks we got is they would rather see more investment into housing and being able to keep folks, whether they graduate from school and they're coming home, or they're moving long-term, or they moved out and they want to be able to come back. They've moved out for a few years, want to be able to come back. They want to be able to do that. So we wanted to be able to provide some of that flexibility. So certainly if, as an individual who graduates, a school and wants to be able to come back home, you can do that. Now, on top of that, we wanted to be able to make some adjustments. So currently only an associate's degree or bachelor's degree qualifies for the student loan. We are opening that up to vocational and technical degrees. There's no reason why we shouldn't be welcoming students that have paid those dollars to be able to get those degrees and certificates from being able to come back home and be able to get assistance with that, because mostly those are the types of jobs that we know a lot of our rural communities are seeking and targeting talent to be able to fill them. On the other side of it, one of the things that, as I mentioned, we did here was housing. So how do we be able to, so there are communities that maybe don't want to invest in student loans, but want to be able to help folks purchase housing. So instead of necessarily just student loan, we're going to open up another option that focuses in on kind of helping with the down payment cost of a home. So the state and the community splitting that cost. And then it would be not the full cost, but it would be, I think, a small percentage of that closing cost. And then on the flip side, if you completely don't like any of that, then we want to be able to build a robust housing program, a 5-year program that instead of kicking money towards that, you're able to kick money towards the building and development of housing through a study and being able to figure out what your housing needs are. So, if there's housing that can be rehabilitated, kicking some money to be able to help out with that, or being able to build some new housing as well. So there'll be 2 tracks. Communities have an option to be able to pick which one they want to be in. And that will hopefully provide some opportunities and some additional resources to be able to tackle some of the things that rural communities are talking about and needing help with.
David, I've got one more question. Was touched on a little earlier today about, and the speakers talked about it as well. In today's environment in the House and the Senate, what are your recommendations on how can our members and their communities reach out to senators, representatives, when you can't really go in and sit and attend the sessions like we did last year and previous years? What's your thoughts on how do we address that? I mean, email is one way, but what other comments, thoughts do you have?
Sure. So, the interesting thing is, I think we're all trying to figure out what the best way to maneuver around this year is. And it's certainly a work in progress. I don't think any of us have mastered exactly how to operate with this year, but we're certainly doing the best we can. The one thing I would tell you is, certainly email helps, phone calls. I think being able for if whether it be Facebook, Twitter, any platform in place where an elected official is on, they're reading their messages. So being able to constantly communicate with them, trying all different platforms. I do know a lot of representatives and senators do read their email. I think it's very important to them, and they do a tremendous job of being able to look at all the constituent email that they receive, especially nowadays. I know there's been some challenges with respect to the Labor Department. So a lot of them are kind of combing through and trying to help out constituents as much as they can. So I think as much, if you have phone numbers, certainly give them a call. If you see them out in local, in the local community, feel free to give them a chat. But I think reaching out in every which way that you can is very important. And like I said, there's definitely a different vibe to this session when it comes to economic development. There has been in previous sessions. There just seems to be a lot more opportunity to get things done. And we have 2 amazing chair people on our commerce committees that very much want to be able to run our bills and talk about all the items that are important to our department, to the economic development community. And I know many of you have been around for the last decade. That hasn't always necessarily been the case. So with the opportunities that we have, I think it's important to be active, let your local electeds know exactly how you feel. Like I said, constantly email them on items that you see coming up. I think, if there's items that we can help out with, please let us know. But it's incredibly important for us to all kind of work through here as a team and be able to talk about all the incredible initiatives that economic development can get done this year. And hopefully will get done, because this really has the opportunity to kind of change the landscape for us as a state and as an economic development community.
Well, do we have any other questions? No. Not seeing any. I do want to thank you on behalf of our members. Those since Governor Kelly has come on board and Lieutenant Governor Secretary Tolan has come on board, there's been great cooperation between the department and our organization, our members. And it's been a great change to see that 2-way street of working with our government officials and the partnerships with the local community. So I want to thank you and the Secretary, Lieutenant Governor, whichever we want to call him, I guess. So thank you for jumping in and filling in some time, and it's been very helpful. Bill, thank you. And we've got 2 more segments to go. Let's see if Sandy is here. There she is. You're a little dark there, so wave your hand, Sandy. So Sandy Braden is here. For those of you all who don't know, Sandy has worked for us for, is this our 3rd year? Or is it longer?
No, I don't. 3rd or 4th. Yeah.
3rd or 4th. It's been a kind of flown by this year, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has.
But Sandy, each of you all should be getting a weekly report from Sandy that talks about what is going on in the session. I find it very helpful. She's boots on the ground, literally there in the Capitol, and maybe not so much in the building itself, but working her contacts and watching what's going on. So she is going to give us an update from her with her thoughts about what's going on. And we appreciate you coming and joining us today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and you've had a really good list of speakers and updates that I think you've gotten a better idea than what I can give you on where we are from an economic development standpoint. And I would echo David that this year is a much more optimistic view of economic development. I think I want to talk more about and echo what David was talking about and what the speaker was talking about, how different things are this year. Last year, as you all know, a lot of legislation was left at the Capitol that was going through very smoothly, not just economic development, but a lot of issues. When COVID hit and they shut down, all of that legislation has come back. And what has occurred, usually in a session like this or any session, you'll have the first 2-3 weeks where everybody is having informational hearings, talking about the issues, talking about what's going on. That hasn't happened. The first week and a half of the session, they were having hearings, passing bills. I think there is a concern that if there was another situation like last year, there are some things they want to get through. One of those was the Emergency Management Act, which the governor has passed, that goes through March 31st. That includes emergency actions for COVID, but it also includes all the liability protections for the various pieces of COVID. So that was very important not to allow it to sunset on January 26th. And that kind of gives you, that bill was extended in June until January 26th, because like the speaker said, boy, we can't wait till 2021. We're all sure it's going to be different. You won't need it after January 26th. And so it's a whole different world than what we've been used to. And I know everybody understands that. And the other issues, of course, the abortion amendment that they passed last week, a couple of the issue of the property tax bill, taking off the lid and doing some transparency issues there, Senate Bill 13. And the decoupling bill, which is still kind of had a pretty sizable fiscal note on some of the corporate tax issues, and they've reduced it from 329 million to 100 and some million. But that's still pretty expensive in this point in time. We'll see where that all goes. And then the only constitutionally thing that they have to do is the budget. And that is already being worked, as David said, on the Commerce. The House is they're working through budgets very quickly. So I see a very much deliberate effort to try to get some of this in the books, so that if something happens, we can be able to address important issues. And I think that's the way with a couple of those issues, like the Kit and Kerr and the angel investors and the STAR bonds, because those all have to be addressed this year in some shape or form, otherwise they sunset. So I think that's what you're seeing, is a lot of willingness to get things going. And then the other thing that's occurred because of that, revisors have been hit with a massive number of bills, drafts, quickly. Usually they've got a little bit of time the first month to be able to kind of get caught up and get those bills out. They had 800 requests as of last week. So you're seeing bills coming out slower, which then slows up the process to be able to get them out onto a hearing schedule. So if you got your bill out and it's on a hearing schedule, you're doing great. So there are a lot of just the logistic issues that occur when you have a whole different setup. And I want to address that too, as far as the Capitol itself. Only people who have business in the Capitol, if I go in with my lobbyist badge, that's okay. But the general public is not allowed in the Capitol for the most part. When you walk into the Capitol, you're asked to have your temperature taken. You can also get tested. The general public can get tested as you go into the Capitol. It's a whole different feel. I was there for a hearing this morning, and you just don't have people in the rooms. The dynamics change when you don't have people in the rooms. You don't have revisors in the room, so when somebody has an amendment, it's up on a screen. And it starts to take a life of its own because they don't have a piece of paper in front of them to look at and to change something if they need to. It's all up on a screen. And the revisor is not in the room like they normally would to kind of describe what's going on. So everything is being done via a screen like this. And so that requires a whole different way of looking at issues. And it also requires, from a lobbying standpoint, as I'm sure you all have felt in this last year, there's not that personal interaction of being able to kind of say, gee, you know, wouldn't this work better over here? That's just not there. And so it is taking a little bit more effort and a lot more time to work through some of these issues. Which brings me to the testimony. There are 3 ways you can testify at the Capitol. One's by written only, 2 virtually like we're doing right now, and 3 in person. 3 out of all of the rooms in the Capitol have got limited seating. There are 3 Senate rooms, taxation, utilities, whatever meets in 548 and a couple other rooms, there is seating for people. And you are having a lot of people from the outside tune in and watch via the WebEx, the YouTube. And I will say that's another alternative to being there in person, is testifying in WebEx. It's not as good as being in person, but it's better than written, because if you will recall, they don't have paper. And so they have to look on their computers for written testimony. So if there's a chance that you can help out by actually having somebody from one of your group's communities get on a WebEx and testify, that adds at least a somewhat of a dimension of personalization and working through that. But it is a different world. And so I think you just have to think about some of those things. And in the past, you would have wondered where your bill is. Well, it's still down in the revisors because they have not been able to adjust and get all that done in the amount of time that they've been given. The other thing that I'm seeing is not just with the economic development stuff, but almost all bills are being introduced in both House and Senate. And so that also doubles up the number of bills that are being introduced that have to have different RS numbers. Even though, so you've got that kind of parallel pathway that sometimes in the past wasn't there. And I think that also adds to the issue of how do we get something accomplished? And it also, I think, stems from last year. Let's make sure we got the Senate and the House agreeing on something so that if we have to get this done quickly, it's already gone both through the Senate and the House and it can be acted on. So I think those are some things you just have to kind of be ready for. And yeah, they're coming up quickly, but that's good because that means that there's interest in getting it accomplished. And in case something happens, there's another breakout of pandemic. But I will say everybody has been very good about social distancing over the Capitol. We wear masks. Everybody is taking the precautions that in some states you're not hearing about. So I would encourage to, as David said, to make sure you email, and I can send the list of the senators and their emails for both the House and Senate Commerce Committees out to you so that you have that you can go ahead and email your support for a bill. And like I said, the phone numbers will be there and you can call them. They do have staff that is responding. And so you can make the phone call to weigh in on a bill. So I think that's kind of what I have. And it's, not really very issue oriented because you've heard that. And I just kind of wanted to give you a sense of how things are operating over there and how different it is. And I've not sat in front of a screen this long and watched hearings in a real long time. Now, there is a benefit of this because they're all being recorded. So you can also go to YouTube, go to the Kansas Legislative website, go to the audio video drop down and go to the very last one for a Senate and House video. And all of the hearings are recorded on the YouTube. So you can go in and actually listen to committees and their actions and what they've been doing in testimony, even if it's in the past. And that's been kind of really helpful because once you can't get to all of them, so now you can go back and listen to them. So that's one thing you can do. And I've got that link on your weekly reports. So we can work on that too, but that is available on your reports. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, or if there's something else you'd like me to address, I'd be happy to. I think everything's kind of moving right along.
Joanne, do we have any questions out there?
I don't show any in the chat.
I've got just a couple.
Okay.
One of your last comments about people being there, the staffing doesn't seem to be as high a number as in years past, I'm sure due to COVID. I was trying to get hold of some people over the last week or two, and it was hit and miss, to say the least, on getting contacts. And I know they get probably hundreds of emails a day, some of them, and that was difficult. But those are some good tips. If you would send a list of the Senate and House members you have to Mary, and those of you all out there who want that, or we'll just go ahead and send it out to everybody during an update to the membership. So,
Mitch, I might go ahead and ask, with the executive reorg that have been proposed, there's two of them really out there. How do you think that they're being received? One better than the other, or neither very well, or what do you think?
Oh, I have not heard anything, but I'm glad you mentioned the ERO. I was asked today by the travel industry if KEDA would testify in favor of that on Monday. And that was about 2 hours ago. So I think there's a lot of interest and a lot of support in it because that's the way it was before. And David, maybe you can address that a little bit better. Are you getting any different response back on that particular issue?
So specifically on the tourism ERO, for the most part, we've generally gotten a lot of positive support for it. We're not hearing a lot of any type of negativity. We are hearing some folks that are in more rural areas asking, will this impact the way tourism approaches wildlife and hunting and fishing and the like. And of course, we're the first ones to be able to talk about how important that is to our state and why it's important for us to have that component in our overall marketing program. So when we have that one marketing plan for our state, that part will be featured. So no, for the most part, we have gotten mostly positive feedback on that.
I know we had a couple people in the chat box that made comments about supporting this bill, and we'll be reaching out to them as well.
Well, and Lee Johnson just commented that the Senate agenda actually had the ERO 48 on their agenda today.
Is
I don't-
anybody else?
That's Monday.
Monday, yeah.
It's coming up Monday.
I think the agenda came out today, but it should be for Monday.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because otherwise we all missed it.
Whoops, we were here. Okay, well, Sandy, I appreciate it. And as I said earlier about your reports, it's very helpful to,
Thank you.
even though we're, I'm 90 minutes away, but as you said, it's hard to get into the building, and
Yeah.
I definitely like the options that you laid out. The in-person, of course, is tougher. They get lots of emails and letters, but that web part is very interesting, and part that we need to work.
And what it seems to be pretty easy because the committee secretary will send you a link, and then they'll let you in at your appropriate time. You still have to send testimony into them and let them know, and we can help you with that too. But with getting it over there, but again, it's almost easier because they've gone paperless in most of those committees now. So you don't have to run 50 copies of something over there quickly and all of that, which takes up some amount of time and resources. So, but no, it has really kind of streamlined some stuff. It's made it difficult in other ways, but it has streamlined things all the way around, so.
Always pluses and minuses to any changes.
Yep.
Okay, well, I don't see anybody with their hand up or any questions. So Sandy, we appreciate your time and your insight again. And
Okay, thank you
for coming today.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye. Okay, we're on, believe it or not, we're on the home stretch. I've got just a few comments to make because our previous speakers really, David, you and Sandy, and obviously Lieutenant Governor did a great job of laying out, the key pieces of legislation that's being talked about. For our newer members, each year we do a plan for the upcoming legislative year. If you have not received that, you can either call me, and there'll be email and phone numbers for Steve, Janet, and myself at the end of the slides, or just reach out to Mary and she can send you the general positions, kind of the standards from the last several years that we've used on establishing the importance of Department of Commerce, that relationship. So I'm going to just jump in here real quick, and I'm not going to read you word by word, but I'm just going to go over some of the key items that's been touched on and what we think is important. So we're going to fly pretty fast through here. So Mary, why don't you go ahead and go on to the next slide. These are the foundational principles I was talking about that really have not changed to any large extent over the last several years, but really talks about the importance of the economic development process, aspects of working with our existing businesses, recruiting new industry to the state, and then also the entrepreneurial aspect of helping startups here in the state of Kansas. So that's one of the things we also talk about. It's a consistent, long-term, interactive process that we have of working with businesses, site selectors, and other professionals that are involved in this. But over the last several years, we've made changes of supporting the Department of Commerce that, you know, they are the lead agency, and we work with them directly on a one-on-one in terms of our lead generation, other economic development projects over the course of the years. Okay, move ahead. General positions, very similar to the same thing we've talked about. I've done had a good discussion about the framework for growth, what we're trying to use that to help push forward numerous bills that we've already talked about. You know, the taxation, the three-legged approach on balancing income, property, and sales tax. That goes back, I think, to the beginning of time in economic development. Open records, we support more balance where there is some client privacy that we're still able to have. Department of Commerce is in charge of business development marketing, working across the state with our communities. I'm just trying to skip ahead here. We've talked about the Secretary Lorenz being here, the statewide transportation plan, the IKE plan, which is a great name. You know, that's critical, is transportation for the department and for the communities across the state. Tools, we can go ahead and move on to the next one. I think we've got a slide. There's the general positions I kind of ran through. Let's go ahead to the next one. Here are the economic development tools. I think we've touched on every one of these. The only one I did not hear, I believe, is the bill that is working on approving licensing. We have, especially with Fort Riley here, we have families that come in being based at Raleigh or in Wichita at the Air Base. Those spouses that move here, maybe they're teachers, maybe they're hairdressers. There's so many different approval processes that these new citizens have to go through. And why should our state really be that much different for a teacher to be approved? So this has been reported many times to Secretary Tolan has talked about it. The military folks have talked to him and other economic development people, that this is such a hindrance to their moving to the state of Kansas. So that's one that's been pushed forward that I don't believe that was touched on. Well, we talked about housing, and obviously that's a critical issue for rural and the moderate income housing programs. There's been discussions about a $2 million level for the MIH program, so we need to support that. ROS and the various new tools that's been talked about, we've covered that. Star bonds, the attraction, obviously of destination locations to the state. You can move it. We're almost ready to move. And then the new twist on that is the potential use of attracting corporate headquarters using star bonds. This has not been done before, but there's been some discussions on communities to being able to use that program to attract headquarter locations to their city. So our community has been very successful with the star bond issue 2 or 3 years ago now. So we're very supportive of that, even though we don't have an active project. Okay, let's go ahead. I'm not going to beat Kit and Kerr anymore. It's been touched on. As Sandy mentioned, it was very, very far ahead in the session last year. I think if we hadn't had to close down, it would have been approved. Framework for growth, again, I mentioned that already. We're supportive of that. The ERO, number 36, the movement of tourism back to the Department of Commerce where it was several years ago. We're in support of that. And that wraps up my comments. If anybody has a question, you can go ahead and go on through the slides there. That really is a quick overview, but our earlier speakers did a great job on that. So does anybody have a question? Is anybody still awake out there? All right. Well, let's move on to the next slides we have. Do we have some more slides? right, so changing topics. We want to congratulate the scholarship recipients from 2020 and 2021. Obviously, last year there was issues with COVID and the program was not in place, but we held those scholarships to Paul Bean. Paul is in Franklin County and their Economic Development Council. Lacey Jansen, who's in Hutchinson, Reno County Chamber. Shelley Casser. Shelley's with the Southwest Johnson County EDC. So those were the three recipients from last year's funds. And we've got 4 from 2021. We're increased as benefit to our membership. We increased the number of scholarships for this year. And these are all going to the program that serves Missouri and Kansas. So I believe if there's some other programs that people are interested in, we would consider that. So you might want to talk to Mary Perez about that and get some questions answered. But the 2021 recipients, Sarah Hayden from Great Bend, Ashlyn Hollemeyer, I believe I'm not butchering her name too bad, down at Cali County first, Leslie Schreg, City of Kingman, and last is Celia Young. Celia's at the Phillips County Economic Development Group. So we want to congratulate those 7 individuals, and we're appreciative of their interest in further educating themselves. I know from my past time, many years ago, the basic class is really lays a great foundation for somebody that's just getting into economic development, or maybe they want to further their education. So that's been very positive. Again, congratulations, and look forward to hearing more about this program as the year moves ahead. Mr. President, I'm trying to look at anything else that I was responsible for. We do want to thank Black Hills Energy and Kansas Manufacturing Solutions for their investment in the program. And I believe this is my last slide. Here it is. Thank you, Mary. Many of you all know we're doing monthly programs. It's not every month, but we've got 2 coming up in February and March. On February 24th, from 3 to 4 p.m. is the National Bio-Agri Defense Facility. We'll have an hour program learning as that major investment in the state is coming to conclusion. We'll learn more about what's going on there. And then in March, again on the 24th from 3 to 4, the Midwest Dairy Association is going to come and talk about the growth of the dairy industry in the state and other information to those that have interest in ag. So keep your dates marked for those events, and go ahead and mark down September 21st, 22nd, or hopefully our annual fall conference can be an actual face-to-face meeting. It is by coincidence in Salina this year, and hopefully we'll be able to see you all come and show you what's going on and have an educational couple days learning more about economic development. Okay, Mr. President, was there anything else?
I don't have anything except to thank you for putting the agenda together. I really appreciate the job you did and the flexibility that you had, as you had some people drop out and some people added at the last minute. I appreciate Mary Perez, as we all do a lot, and also Heather Pearson back home in Topeka, as we were scrambling with internet issues at the beginning of the this process. Well, actually, we had a board meeting at 11:30, and I called Mary at 11:10, and she said, "We've lost the internet through the state." And it's like, well, that's not a good sign, because we've got some things we need to accomplish today. But they worked with IT and got it all put together. We did have some bandwidth issues with Lieutenant Governor Tolan, but all in all, I think it was real successful, and we appreciate everyone's patience. What was interesting to me is I was watching the number of people that came on were right here at 1 o'clock, and it was a pretty high number. I don't know, 70, 80. And after the governor finished, we were over 100, and we stayed that way or near 100. We have 90 now. People stuck around for the full afternoon. So we really appreciate you doing that. And Mary will be sending out a survey. So we want your feedback and your ideas on topics that Carrie Folletti and her group, the Education Committee, can put together through 2021. So with that, I'll just check the chat to see if Janet McCrae misses people, and she's an introvert. So there you go. So at some point we'll get all together, but it's nice to see everybody's faces, and go Chiefs. Thank you.